It's not funny. Yeah, we're recording, but we're not live.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to this Ocean Protection Council meeting. We have several of us meeting in person here at our Natural Resources Agency headquarters in Sacramento, and then several folks joining from throughout the state via the live stream. So looking forward to a really productive meeting today, which includes some welcomes and includes goodbyes as well. But before we kick it off, I would ask my colleague Jenn Eckerle to take the roll.
Thank you, Secretary Crowfoot. So Secretary Crowfoot.
Here.
Councilmember Stone.
Here.
Councilmember Kunkel.
Here.
Councilmember Stone. Councilmember Brown. I'm sorry.
Here.
Thank you. And then on Zoom, I believe we have Councilmember Landau and or Councilmember Naymark.
Here. Both here on behalf of Secretary Garcia, who will be joining us shortly.
Thank you. And then do we have Senator Allen? Okay, and Councilmember Diamond won't be able to join us today.
Well, thanks so much. As I said, we are excited to welcome a new member of our council, is Yana Garcia, who leads our California Environmental Protection Agency. Bittersweet, of course, to say goodbye to Jared Blumenfeld, who was an ambitious and creative partner on this council for over the last almost 4 years. And we are really excited to welcome Secretary Garcia to this role. You may know her from her work at the Attorney General's office, where she served as a special advisor and environmental advisor to our California Attorney General, Rob Bonta, or from her work as a deputy secretary at the California Environmental Protection Agency, where she worked on border issues as well as environmental justice issues. So we're really excited to have Yana aboard. We are sad to say goodbye to Assemblymember Mark Stone. We understand, Mark, this is, of course, your last meeting as you finish your term, and just want to personally thank you for your commitment, your leadership on this council, and of course, as one of the key legislative champions of all things oceans and coasts in recent decades. So I know we'll have a chance to hear from you. Today is the last meeting for our controller, our state controller, Betty Yee. And I know, Christina, you're here in Betty's stead, but Controller Yee has been an absolute champion. You may know that that's the seat that the controller sits in alternates between our lieutenant governor and our controller. And over the years that she's been with us at OPC, Controller Yee has distinguished herself as an absolute champion, both for environmental protection and for evolving the so-called blue industry or the blue ocean industry. And the work to really make sure that we're achieving our environmental sustainability goals, but also through developing economic prosperity for coastal communities. So really thankful to her. This is also the first meeting where in 3 years that will not be led by Mark Gold. Mark served as our Deputy Secretary for Oceans and Coasts and the Director of OPC. Under Mark's leadership, of course, with Jenn and the OPC staff, OPC has broken new ground. We call it sort of a swing for the fences strategy to move further and faster to protect our oceans and coastal environments than we've ever done before. And I'm personally and professionally thankful to Mark for all of his commitment and excited to continue his legacy of leadership. We're really quite excited to welcome Jenn as the acting deputy secretary within our agency for oceans and coasts and the leader of the OPC. And we get to talk today about a really exciting amount of progress that's taking place on our most important priorities. So very excited about that. We have a lot to celebrate, including remarkable leadership from our legislature and our governor, and more resources than we've had really possibly ever to do the work that we need to do across California's coasts and ocean environment. For example, our coastal conservancy partners received upwards of $700 million to advance sustainability projects that we'll be discussing and helping shape here in coming years. Our Ocean Protection Council has upwards of over $250 million to advance the strategic plan that we now have in place thanks to the OPC staff. So while the challenges are unprecedented, given accelerating climate change, sea level rise, all of these various impacts, the opportunity is great because of the resources we have and frankly, the political will of our leadership. You also know that the legislature passed some groundbreaking legislation from plastics pollution reduction into so many other issues. So it's a really, really exciting time. And then in this auditorium just last week, the week before, we kicked off our 30 by 30 partnership, which is this broad inclusive coalition that will help deliver on the state's goal of protecting, conserving 30% of our lands and coastal waters by 2030. And so there's a terrestrial element of that. And then as my colleague Jenn Norris says, there's a salty side of that. And that is, of course, the improved conservation we're going to do in our state waters. So we're really quite excited about that. And then some of us will be participating in an international negotiation that is being hosted by the United Nations in Montreal in December, specifically focused on the protection of biodiversity across our world. Special thanks to our staff member, Mike Eckerle, for really helming this effort. California is the first ever subnational that's achieved what's called observer status within these negotiations between nation states around what safeguards they're going to put in place to protect biodiversity. So we're really excited to bring a delegation to Montreal to press for strong biodiversity protection and frankly, bring models like our MPA network that show that we can actually do quite a lot to protect our marine biodiversity in a big state like California. I'll lastly say that today we have a great meeting. We get to hear from our summer interns at OPC that are doing remarkable work. That will be probably the highlight of our discussion here today, but maybe not, because we are also approving our first ever equity plan, which is the result of a lot of thoughtful work from the staff and inclusive participation from stakeholders and community members. And we're really thrilled to launch our Tribal Marine Stewardship Network today and consider funding our tribal governments to really move towards co-management of state waters in their ancestral lands, breaking new ground. So it's a busy meeting, looking forward to all of our progress. And so we're going to turn it over to Jenn in just a moment to give an executive director's report. But before we do that, I want to turn it over to council members who may have announcements or thoughts. And if I can impose on Assemblymember Stone, I might ask him for his thoughts first, given you are a short timer.
Short timer. Yes, thank you. Thank you. A lot of how the legislature functions is sometimes difficult, but there are parts of this job that have been absolutely spectacular, and being able to sit on OPC is definitely one of them. I will miss being a part of an organization that has been really so cutting edge and has transformed how a state agency can function, especially among other state agencies. And OPC has become, through its policy leadership, scientific leadership, and others, a real linchpin on how not just issues that come through OPC address ocean and coastal issues, but really all the other agencies, and tie that together, whether it's Caltrans or many others whose work definitely impacts coastal resources and ocean resources. And OPC, under Mark's leadership, really remarkably has brought a lot of that together. And this is, I think, a good model for us, but a good model for other sectors, I think, too, of state government. That's really what's been remarkable about the Ocean Protection Council. But this agency is certainly larger than I am and more important. Somebody else from the Assembly will be appointed, and I know OPC will continue because of the groundwork that has been set. And Secretary, with you and with Jenn and with others, how this agency has been put together. And especially, I cannot underscore more the science component of it, which sits with us at the dais and is a part of all of our conversations. That's unfortunately a bit rare. So I know this agency has a lot of great work ahead of it, and working on the foundations that have been laid, I'm very excited to see what the next steps are and how ocean policy continues to evolve in California.
Well, thank you once again for just your steadfastness and your vision, your boldness, and encouraging us to go further and faster. I just came in today, right now, from a meeting of Governor Newsom had with the governor of Oregon and Washington and the premier of British Columbia. And it's interesting, they talked about ocean acidification as something that each of their jurisdictions faces, and a proof point of collaboration, because it was actually work that OPC helped to do that brought everyone together to tackle ocean acidification. And that work across these 4 jurisdictions has turned into an international alliance to combat ocean acidification. So the ideas that you have helped to promote here and champion in the legislature have found their way across the world, I would say. I want to give Secretary Garcia a chance to say hello and have us welcome her here. She's not going to be able to serve the entire meeting, and so we have her colleague Anna Neymark that will be filling in that role. But Secretary Garcia wanted to take an opportunity to say hello and share thoughts as she comes aboard the Ocean Protection Council.
Hi there. Hi, everyone. Apologies for not being able to be there with you in person. And yes, I do have to leave a little early today. Joining you all in my 5th week on the job here. Really excited to be with you. Thank you so much for the great work that the council has been doing to date. As many of you may be aware, I am coming from the Attorney General's office and was long looking at your work from that vantage point, and also from my former role within Cali, PA, where I focused on environmental justice and tribal issues. And I know that so much of what you are doing has great points of intersection with both of those topic areas. I'm excited about the work that you all are going to be talking about today with respect to the equity plan. And just really happy to be here. Thanks so much for the warm welcome, Secretary Crowfoot, and looking forward to this space and participating with you all.
Thank you very much. And rest assured, your face was about 10 feet tall on the screen behind us. So
wow,
you're very much here. We really are excited to have you come aboard and looking forward to the work together.
Great.
I would turn
With an imposing presence. I'll be less imposing.
There you go. Over to Mike.
Thank you, Chair Crawford. It's been 2 years since I've been here in person, and it is, as much as I loved sitting in my chair at home and not having to travel from Santa Barbara to Sacramento, which is not the easiest, as you know, Teresa. It's being here and seeing all the faces in the audience, and I want to take just special note of this is a way more diverse audience than it has when I first came on the council almost 8 years ago. I'll say progress and interest in the council's work and the effort to reach out to new to the council's audiences who should have been here a long time ago, but finally are here, and to see what the agenda is today that reflects just the breadth, as Mark noted, of what the council does in terms of protecting the oceans and the communities that want to engage with California's oceans. And I'm just really glad to be here, but more importantly, really glad to see all of you here. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Important contribution there. So before we move on, I want to just share a brief note on public comment for today, because public comment is obviously really important to shaping our decisions. And we'll hold public comment on each item, items 4 through items 9, And then specifically, item 10 is comment on really any topic that's not specifically related to any of these agenda items. And I will invite public comment after each of the presentations. If you are here in person and you want to make a comment, please line up at the podium. We'll take in-person public comments first. And after all of those in-person attendees have spoken, we will take public comment via those joining us virtually, or from those joining us virtually. If you're joining through Zoom, please raise your virtual hand on your screen and we will unmute you, announce your name, and you'll be able to provide your comment. We also allow for a call-in option for those that are simply calling by telephone. And if you'd like to make public comment when the item is heard and the presentation is being made, please press #2 on your phone. That'll essentially raise your hand and get you in the queue. And then depending on how you've accessed the meeting, you may need to also unmute yourself. Because we want to hear everyone's public comment and we have a lot of work before us, each comment is limited to 2 minutes each, and there'll be a timer on the screen. Anyone interested in providing comment needs to raise his hand by the end of the agenda presentation, so we have a clear list of attendees. And then hands raised after that time are not placed into the queue. So again, if you want to provide comment on items 4 through 10, simply do so as the presentation is occurring on the item. With that said, we are off and running on our agenda and would ask Jen to give us an update on the council's work.
Thank you so much, Chair Crowfoot and members of the council. I'm going to begin my report with an update on OPC's budget. So, Chair Crowfoot, as you mentioned, our investment opportunities are very bright. We have close to $230 million in one-time funding, plus ongoing annual funding of $7.7 million to advance our priorities in the strategic plan. This includes $101.5 million to support SB1 implementation and $100 million for coastal resilience. In the next few weeks, our staff will begin developing an investment strategy for 2023, identifying top priorities, outcomes, and timelines that will maximize our impact and our staff capacity. In addition to the $230 million, we also have $11.3 million of Prop 68 funding that will be awarded through 2 solicitations that are currently underway to support coastal resilience projects and research to understand the nexus between climate change and climate resilience and MPAs, or marine protected areas, excuse me. Projects selected through these solicitations will be brought to the January council meeting for your approval. I want to provide a little more background on the funding for SB1. SB1 is landmark legislation that was authored by Senator Atkins and signed by Governor Newsom in 2021. The bill directs the state to provide funding to local and regional governments to support sea level rise adaptation plans and on-the-ground resilience projects. OPC staff are meeting with the state's sea level rise leadership team on November 1st to begin building out our SB1 grant program, identifying project criteria, and determining how to best prioritize getting this funding into the communities that are most vulnerable and most under-resourced. We plan to provide an update on program development at a future council meeting. One final note on funding. In July, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Marine Debris Program and National Sea Grant released 3 separate federal solicitations for a total of $75 million to advance marine debris removal, community partnerships related to marine debris, and plastics research. OPC partnered with California Sea Grant to submit 3 proposals totaling close to $3.8 million to leverage and pursue these federal funds to advance our 2018 California Ocean Litter Strategy and our statewide microplastic strategy, which was adopted by the council in February of this year. The proposals are due on October 13th, and staff anticipate hearing about the awards in early next year. If funded, these projects will support community engagement, a pilot macro and microplastics monitoring network, and research on the efficacy of green infrastructure in capturing land-based microplastics. Next, just to put a little bit more color on the update to our 30 by 30 efforts, which is the state's initiative to protect 30% of lands and coastal waters by 2030. OPC is going to be leading the effort focused on conserving coastal waters. California's MPA network, covering 16% of state waters, gets us over halfway there. To get to 30%, we are looking at other strategies, including strengthening protections in national marine sanctuaries, exploring options for California Native American tribes to establish indigenous marine stewardship areas that enhance tribal stewardship and of marine ecosystems. And we're also going to evaluate other conservation measures, such as fisheries closures, to determine whether they provide the biodiversity benefits that meet our definition of conserved. OPC is going to serve as the coordinating entity for facilitating discussions among tribes and fishermen and NGOs and state and federal agencies and others. We will establish opportunities for stakeholder input and discussion to understand environmental justice, conservation, access, fishing, and federal perspectives. And we will lead tribal consultations and listening sessions to ensure that tribes are prioritized in 30 by 30 implementation. And we will, of course, also closely coordinate with our sister state agencies. More steps on implementation and our engagement opportunities will be coming soon. Next, I'd like to share a few updates regarding our engagement and partnership with California Native American tribes. At the council meeting last December, as part of our targeted environmental justice solicitation, you approved Proposition 1 funding for an acquisition for land return to the Wiyot tribe. Last month, tribal affairs leadership from the governor's office and CNRA and OPC staff were honored to join the Wiyot tribe and Cal Poly Humboldt in a ceremony to celebrate the tribe's purchase of one of the last pieces of undeveloped coastal wetland and upland in their ancestral territory near Humboldt Bay. The 46 acres known as Marashawak or Wolf's House will be preserved for the cultural significance of the Wiyot tribe, for ecocultural restoration, water quality protection, and biodiversity conservation. Additionally, to further enhance our partnership between OPC and tribes, staff has been developing a tribal engagement strategy. Based on feedback that we received in early consultations and listening sessions in 2021, OPC has developed a strategy that includes guiding principles, specific opportunities for enhancing tribal engagement across all of OPC's efforts, and approaches for improving communication between OPC and tribes. Our draft strategy was released to tribes for a 90-day consultation period on July 6th, and on August 24th, we hosted 2 community roundtable listening sessions to discuss the strategy and receive tribal input. The consultation period on this draft will close tomorrow, October 7th. OPC anticipates bringing a final strategy to the council for adoption at your January meeting. Obviously, we have a lot more to celebrate on the agenda today around our work with tribes, but we'll wait for that later in the agenda. A quick update on offshore wind. In May, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management published its proposed sale notice for leases within the Morro Bay and the Humboldt Bay wind lease areas. OPC staff worked with other state agencies to provide feedback on that sale notice before the public comment closed on August 1st. Our joint comments included a recommendation to increase the bid credits for community benefit agreements for fishermen, local communities, and tribes, and the need for comprehensive environmental and fisheries management. That final sale notice is forthcoming and will be followed by the auction of 5 lease sales within those 2 lease areas. We anticipate those lease sales coming up before the end of this year. OPC staff is continuing to work with the Energy Commission and other state agencies to support offshore wind strategic planning process, fund critical research to minimize the impacts to environmental and cultural resources and fishing in support of AB 525 implementation. And finally, just a few personnel updates. First, I'm happy to introduce Shri Gopal, maybe she can wave her hand in the audience there, who joined OPC in mid-September as our new Coastal Habitats Program Manager. Shri recently earned a Master of Advanced Studies degree in Marine Biodiversity and Conservation from Scripps Institution of Oceanography, where her graduate work focused on coastal management. As part of her graduate work, Shri conducted an independent study with OPC to explore the efficacy of developing a blue carbon mitigation banking system for California. Prior to her graduate work, Shri worked in the pharmaceutical industry for over a decade as a scientist and a team leader after receiving her Ph.D. in bioengineering from MIT. We are absolutely thrilled to have Shri join our team. I also just want to share that Tova Handelman recently left OPC for a position with the California Academy of Sciences, and we are wishing Tova the best in this next chapter for her. A job announcement for a biodiversity environmental scientist position will be posted soon to backfill this vacancy. And we're looking for candidates that can help lead efforts across our biodiversity protection portfolio, including strengthening the conservation at the land-sea interface, rapid responses strategies to biodiversity emergencies, and improving coastal and ocean monitoring in California. And before I conclude, I just wanted to take a moment on behalf of the entire staff at OPC to thank Mark Gold for his leadership over the last 3+ years. Our collective accomplishments are a result of his ambitious vision and his relentless focus on ensuring that science is at the forefront of our policy decisions and that the state accelerates meaningful action to protect our coasts on the backdrop of a changing climate. Mark, thank you for teaching us to go big or go home, for showing us the value of being outcome obsessed, giving us each an opportunity to lead, and for laying out a roadmap for OPC to continue our important work. And with that, I will turn it back over to you, Chair Crowfoot. Thank you.
Thanks so much. It's a time of transition, but of course, incredible progress. And to see the fruits of the work and what this council approved, boy, even a mere year ago, turn into a tribal land return that's already been happening or already happened and celebrated is pretty remarkable. So huge thanks to the entire OPC team on all fronts. We have, of course, speaking of science, our great partner in Liz Whiteman and the Ocean Science Trust, and would like to hear, Liz, from what's happening at OST in partnership with OPC.
Thank you, Chair Crowfoot, council members. First, I wanted to just quickly extend appreciation for our longstanding partnership with OPC and with Jenn specifically, and to express our support in swinging for the fences in the months to come. I'm not great at American sporting metaphors. Also, an Ocean Science Trust brief update. I wanted to mention the passage of Assembly Bill 2287, the California Ocean Resources Stewardship Act, or CORSA, that updates our founding legislation. It's the first update since our creation 20 years ago. And this legislation reaffirms the essential role of independent science in spurring action on critical coast and ocean issues in close partnership with the state. The update enables us to most effectively pursue and deliver the solutions essential to equitable climate adaptation, meeting the urgency of the moment. So I'm taking this opportunity now to extend our gratitude to Assemblymember Mark Stone for leading and championing this legislation alongside co-authors Senator Laird and Assemblymember Ting, and add my voice to recognize Councilmember Stone's longstanding commitment to protecting California's coastal communities. And I also extend my thanks to the governor and our state partners for your support, and look forward to continuing the partnership on many priorities, including things like offshore wind 30 by 30 and many more, like sea level rise. So back to our current work to support progress against the OPC strategic plan goals. Beginning with goal 1 and specifically sea level rise, you might recall from the last council meeting, together OPC and OST launched a new science task force to update California's policy guidance with new scientific understanding of global sea level rise and local coastal flooding. So the number crunching to update those projections is underway. We're looking forward to engaging with the statewide leadership team to answer some clarifying questions that have come up from the task force and elicit feedback on the projections and how we approach that exercise so that the updated guidance can be most actionable in decision making. And then we're also planning to turn quickly to local and regional engagement to share a little bit more about our collaborative process and ground truth the steps that we're taking. And we really hope to connect with and leverage the many activities and events happening throughout the state already. So a second quick update related to, quick but important update related to Goal 2 and OPC's work on the equity plan. We've begun recruiting new members to the OPC Science Advisory Team. We hope to welcome scientific experts from a broad range of career stages, backgrounds, and demographic identities. And we particularly encourage scientists from the just breadth of social sciences, including disciplines addressing equity and environmental justice. Really to better broaden and represent the disciplines necessary to tackle the wicked problems that we're facing for our coast and ocean. So we welcome expressions of interest until November 4th. The announcement with more details is linked on this meeting agenda online. This is a first step for us, but I want to acknowledge it's not the only, nearly the only work required for doing our part to uphold the actions and progress envisioned in the draft equity plan. Finally, on Goal 3, over the summer months, we've supported OPC in the development of a restoration and mitigation policy by working with a panel of scientists to really dig into what our updated scientific understanding of marine and coastal system tells us in how to address the really increasingly complex issues that are arising with increasing uses of the ocean and impacts to our coastal communities. Just a quick example, the new dynamics associated with climate change and the uncertainties that brings means that we have to think completely differently about our expectations of success in a restoration project. So we're looking forward to really continuing to draw on that scientific thinking to support OPC in finalizing a draft of the policy ready for the next step, which is, I understand, broader agency review and input. And thank you.
Liz, thanks so much. We're now going to move to agenda item number 4, which is an informational item. And it's an opportunity to hear an update from our OPC summer interns. I know we were and are really energized that OPC has established this summer internship program to bring the best and brightest young minds, student minds into the work we're doing in public service to protect the oceans and coasts. And the goal with this OPC program is, frankly, to benefit from this knowledge and this energy of the interns, and to provide pathways for leaders, what we call rising juniors and seniors, undergraduates, to identify work that they can be doing and strengthening their pathway to get into this work. We hope to entice some of you to consider joining state government. And that's, of course, one of our ulterior motives with the summer internship. But I think this is our second cohort of interns. And last year, we really enjoyed hearing some on the work that you all did over the summer, and look forward to doing that again. And I'll turn it over to Jen to introduce them.
Thank you. So I'll just do a quick introduction and then you guys can come on up. So I'm so thrilled to introduce this item, which, as Secretary Crowfoot said, is going to be a brief presentation from our summer interns. This is the second year of our 10-week summer paid summer internship, focused on undergraduate students and giving them experience to work with coastal and ocean science, policy, and management in California. So this summer, we had a cohort of 6 interns: Alyssa Jane, Gloria Jenn, Ty Lay, Jazz Martin, and Elizabeth Wynn were all selected through our competitive process. And Emily Zhao joined us through a merit-based award from an undergraduate fellowship program at Stanford. And this is the 5th year of an ongoing partnership through that program with OPC and Stanford. During their internship, each student had a staff mentor and worked on an individual project to advance the priorities in our strategic plan. They also worked together to develop a set of coast and ocean health indicators that will be integrated into our annual State of the Coast and Ocean report, and are also going to provide the foundation for our State of the Coast and Ocean report card in 2025. Today, Alyssa, Gloria, and Elizabeth are here with us, and they will provide a brief summary of their work. And they will also be presenting on behalf of Ty, Jazz, and Emily, who are unable to join us here today because they are in class right now. So I just want to say before we begin, we are so impressed with these students. We're so grateful for their commitment to protecting the ocean, and we can't wait to see what the future holds for all of them. Thank you for your hard work and for being an integral part of our team over the last few months. And I'll turn it over to Alyssa, I think, to start the presentation.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alyssa Nazari Jane, and I am a fourth-year environmental studies major at the University of California, Santa Barbara. And I had the pleasure of working with my mentor, Justine Kimball, who's a senior climate change program manager. If I go to the next slide, please. And then the slide after that. So this summer, I focus on OPC's Indicators Project, which evaluates the condition of the coast and ocean by examining several indicators aligned with OPC's strategic plan goals. The long-term vision for this project, like Jen mentioned, is to provide an annual report card by 2025 with a more short-term goal of a report by the end of 2022. I led the Indicators Project by working with the other interns and all of our mentors to create templates that we use for compiling information about trends for each indicator, as well as an outline for the 2022 report that is translating all of that information into a graphic or into a narrative. I also specifically focused on the sea level rise and ocean warming indicators and worked with intern Emily Zhao on the Eckerle indicator. For these indicators, I compiled data and scientific findings and finally wrote narratives to include in the 2022 report. Additionally, I had the opportunity to sit in on Prop 68 letter of intent review sessions to learn more about the application process and the grant approval process. And throughout this internship with OPC, I learned how science is used to inform policy and management decisions, as well as how to synthesize data and scientific findings into accessible reports and presentations. I really enjoyed reading reports and papers and looking at current trends, especially for climate change indicators, since it allowed me to better understand how climate change is impacting California's oceans and OPC's role in managing that. I also had the opportunity to coordinate between the mentors and the interns and work with everybody on the Indicators project, which was a really valuable experience. All the interns and mentors are also knowledgeable and really good at what they do, so it was great to learn from their insight and advice. It was also great to be mentored by Justine, who is brilliant and supportive, and she introduced me to a lot of great resources and supported me throughout the whole summer. So I had a great time learning from and working with her. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, the next intern, Emily Zhao, is unable to attend this meeting due to conflicts with school. So I have the pleasure of speaking on her behalf, and she is a wonderful person and was a really great intern who did lots of hard work. And I'm really thrilled to present some of that today. She is a second year at Stanford University, majoring in environmental systems engineering with a focus on coastal systems. And this summer, she worked under the incredible guidance of Michael Eckerle and Lindsay Bonito. Next slide, please. In her 10 weeks, Emily was given the opportunity to work on two main deliverables, the first of which allowed her to serve as a lead on developing the Tribal Small Grants Program. This experience has been one of the highlights of her internship with the OPC. It allowed Emily to have direct conversations with some of California's Native American tribal representatives, in the process gaining a deeper understanding of the diversity and tribal priorities and their deep connection with the coast and oceans. With the help of Mike, she outlined the Small Grants Program priorities and drafted a staff recommendation, conducted research on potential grantees, and performed outreach. Emily's second deliverable was working on the Indicators project and the annual State of the Coast and Ocean report. She worked to create indicators for giant and bull kelp, ochre and sunflower star, red and black abalone, and also worked with me on the krill indicator. The process of generating long-term abundance trends and communicating with experts during this work taught her about each species' crucial roles in the ecosystem and the consequences of climate-related changes. This internship was Emily's first time working with a government agency, and the passion, warmth, and knowledge of her mentors, peers, and general staff has greatly influenced her, and she now plans on having a coastal systems focus to her undergraduate degree. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Gloria Jenn. I'm a third-year student at the University of Southern California, where I study public relations and environmental studies. This summer, I had the pleasure to work under Stacy Hayden, communications manager, who was an incredible, incredible mentor, but with just like helping me get more into like this world that I've never really experienced before. Next slide, please. So this summer, I got the opportunity to expand and implement communication strategies across all of OPC's platforms. Under Stacy's guidance, I drafted content and graphics for posts on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and our Facebook pages. These posts highlighted the OPC's work, but also featured the work of grantees and partners. I also learned how to provide greater digital accessibility to OPC documents and images for screen readers and Spanish speakers. Additionally, I got to sit in on meetings with OPC's communications contractor and learn many valuable skills. Outside of communications, I also contributed to an indicator on harmful algal blooms to be included with the OPC Coast and Ocean Indicators project. I'm truly thankful to Stacy, but also for the opportunity to work with such amazing people, including mentors, interns, and staff alike. The things that I've learned throughout the course of this internship has changed the trajectory of my career, and I also hope to work in policy. Next slide, please. So unfortunately, our next intern is unable to attend this meeting due to prior engagements with school and work, but he is thankful to have the opportunity to share what he was able to accomplish throughout the summer with OPC. Tai Lei is currently a third year at the University of California, Riverside, pursuing a degree in environmental sciences. This summer, he worked closely with Caitlin Kalua, OPC's water quality program manager. Throughout the duration of Tai's internship, his work consisted of projects to advance Goal 3.4 of OPC's strategic plan, improve coastal and ocean water quality. His main project was assisting Caitlin as she worked towards advancing and developing proposals to further the goals of the statewide microplastic strategy. The ocean litter strategy and OPC's strategic plan. The proposals focused on soliciting funding to target knowledge gaps in microplastic monitoring, regulation, and marine debris. Tai's tasks primarily consisted of compiling and organizing data to inform the development of these proposals. This involved tasks such as summarizing existing microplastic research projects and researching demographic data in targeted regions in California. Tai also drafted indicators to be included under intern Alyssa's indicator project. His work fell primarily under water quality as he created drafts for the coastal wastewater recycling and beach grades indicators. Throughout the course of the summer, he also collected information for other potential indicators that will be used to help develop the 2022 Coast and Ocean Report. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Nguyen, and I recently graduated from UC San Diego with my bachelor's degree in marine biology. During my internship, I worked with Maria Rodriguez, OPC's Climate and Environmental Justice Program Manager, who I would like to thank for her guidance, support, and mentorship this summer. Next slide, please. This summer, I worked on two main projects: scoping OPC's Environmental Small Grants Program, or Environmental Justice Small Grants Program, and researching an indicator to quantify California's public coastal access as a part of the Indicators Project. For the EJ Small Grants Program, I researched small grant program models developed by state agency partners and external organizations, as well as outlined potential project priorities that align with OPC's strategic plan. I also engaged with and solicited input from community-based organizations that have experience advocating for communities burdened by social inequities and environmental injustices, as well as specialize in providing technical assistance to under-resourced communities and have expertise in designing and administering small grant programs. From this experience, I learned valuable knowledge about different approaches to structuring a small grants program and insights on defining priorities that will directly and meaningfully benefit environmental justice communities. Additionally, I supported Maria with incorporating public feedback into the final version of OPC's equity plan. I also listened in on multiple equity and environmental justice interagency meetings where I learned about other equity and EJ initiatives that are simultaneously occurring. For the Coastal Access Indicator, I analyzed geospatial data from the Coastal Commission's Public Access Points database and the California Protected Areas database to determine acreage of coastal areas that are accessible to the public. In collaboration with the other interns and mentors, I highlighted the importance of identifying other inequitable barriers that may impede on coastal access to the public, such as lack of transportation or affordable overnight accommodations. Overall, I gained valuable insight on various equity and environmental justice initiatives that are happening across the state. And I'm grateful to all OPC staff, agency partners, and community-based organizations for sharing their expertise with me. Next slide, please. Thank you. The next intern unfortunately could not attend today's meeting, and I will be speaking on their behalf. Jazz Martin is an undergraduate student at Cal Poly Humboldt and is majoring in marine fisheries biology. They were mentored by Lindsay Bonito, OPC's Marine Protected Areas Program Manager. Next slide. During their time at OPC, Jazz worked on 2 projects that advanced OPC's strategic goals 3 and 4. The first project advanced Objective 3.3, specifically Target 3.1 or 3.3.1, to integrate MPA data into fisheries management consistent with the Marine Life Management Act. Jazz developed 3 deliverables in this project. First, Jazz created a landscape view document and database that outlines current MPA monitoring that collects fisheries relevant information. This included species-specific information monitored by each habitat group, such as physical monitoring locations, sampling frequency, and fisheries metrics. Second, Jazz developed a database of fisheries data gaps to identify by CDFW's enhanced status reports for MPA monitored fish and invertebrate species. They then identified areas where MPA monitoring data could be used to fill fisheries management monitoring gaps. Finally, Jazz drafted a report that described past and current efforts to integrate MPA monitoring data into fisheries management, and using the previous 2 deliverables, provided recommendations on candidate species that might be optimal to better align monitoring efforts. Jazz's second project was to develop a sustainable fisheries indicator for the OPC Coast and Oceans Indicators Report, which supports Objective 4.1 of the strategic plan. This indicator looked at fisheries landing trends through time for commercially important species, which included Dungeness crab, Chinook salmon, and market squid. Jazz wanted to share that they learned an incredible amount about state MPA's wildlife management legislation and how to encourage various conservation and government entities to work together to create more efficient monitoring and management strategies. They are extremely grateful to Jenn, Lindsay, and Mike, and all the staff for the wealth of knowledge skills they have gained at OPC. They really enjoyed working and networking with their fellow interns and hope to keep this connection for years to come. Thanks.
Well,
Next slide, please. So we also want to tell you a bit about our overall experience. To start, we want to thank OPC for this incredible opportunity. We all really enjoyed our time here, and it's been a very educational and fun experience for us all. One of the most valuable parts of this internship was the opportunity to build relationships with the rest of the interns as well as the mentors. The intern cohort quickly became close, and we were all able to work well together, supporting each other through our projects and maintaining a fun and positive team dynamic. Additionally, we also really enjoyed working with our mentors, who were very supportive and provided us with a lot of great guidance and feedback, and we learned so much from them. Also, all the interns were onboarded very quickly and involved in team meetings from the start, so it really felt like part of the OPC team, and we really appreciate it.
Additionally, we felt that all of our projects were incredibly meaningful, not only for us personally, but also valuable to OPC and its mission. The resources that the staff provided to us were plentiful, and we had many opportunities to engage directly with OPC partners and initiatives through our projects. We enjoyed carrying out our projects throughout the summer, producing deliverables for the organization that will continue beyond our time here.
Finally, OPC helped prepare us for academic and career success. Mentors gave us many opportunities to grow our leadership skills and spearhead projects. They worked closely with us to provide feedback, and staff members who were not assigned to be mentors, like Mark Gold and Jenn Eckerle, still took time to give us both academic and career advice. It was extremely insightful to have people with years of experience working in the field of coastal and ocean protection to share their paths with us. Thank you.
thank you. Well, first and foremost, thank you to the scholars that served as interns this summer. Really remarkable work that you've done, and I have to concur that the substantive work that you do will shape the oceans report in 2022 and the state of the oceans, almost like a scorecard coming in 2025. And that's so important, as we discussed in the formation of our strategic plan, to help people that don't live and breathe the ocean to really understand the challenges that our coast and oceans faces. So your work will live on. and then for helping form those grant programs for tribal co-management, but also for equity and EJ, is going to shape the way resources get out for years to come. So huge thanks to you, and huge thanks to the OPC staff. I know how hard you all work and in your day jobs, or at least in your core responsibilities. So for you all to be mentors and to be meaningful mentors, supporting and propelling the careers of our colleagues is just remarkable. And I think we've got great momentum with this intern program. So exciting there. This is an item that accepts any public comment that members or viewers here today want to provide. And so let me just pause and ask if there's any public comment to provide. All right, Jen, I'm going to give you the final word on this before. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to confirm there's no virtual comments.
Thanks so much. And I'll make sure to check in with you after each presentation. Jen, I'm going to give you the final word here.
I just want to say thank you so much. You guys did an incredible job. It is the first, but probably not the last time I'm going to cry in this meeting.
All right. Well, thank you. So then we're going to move on to item number 5, which is an action item, and it's consideration and potential approval of a disbursement of funding to the Tribal Marine Stewards Network. And I want to provide a little context before I ask Mike Eckerle, our Senior Program Manager at OPC, and Megan Rocha, the Executive Director of Resangini Rancheria and a member of the Tribal Marine Stewards Network Leadership Council, to come up and present. And the context is this. Shortly after he took office, Governor Newsom issued a formal apology on behalf of California to tribal governments and communities for what has been a history of disconnection, discrimination, and violence. And that was an important moment that I felt fortunate in my career to witness, but it was the beginning of a journey, because if the apology were all that was going to happen, it would obviously be insufficient. So the governor turned around and charged us all who lead agencies to, first of all, listen and learn. Listen to how the institutions that we now represent have perpetuated that inequity and that discrimination and disconnection and violence. And then to learn both from the stewardship the tribal communities have been providing for thousands of years, and learn how we can build opportunities for true partnerships, where in a respectful way we can partner with tribal governments, tribal communities to protect nature, to steward natural resources. So it was to acknowledge, to listen and learn. And then the third is to act, to step up, to walk the walk. We're talking the talk, but can we walk the walk through actions? And I see this item as quite literally an action item, where we're actually investing in building partnerships, utilizing tribal stewardship that we desperately need to in California to help protect and restore our ecosystems. So I'm personally really excited and thankful for the work that's been done, particularly among our tribal leaders, for having the patience and the graciousness to spend time with us to build out this program. So with that said, I'd ask Mike and Megan to come forward and to provide a presentation here today.
Thank you so much, Secretary Crowfoot and council members. Mike Eckerle, Senior Biodiversity Program Manager and Tribal Liaison. And yeah, today I really just could not be more excited to talk about the Tribal Marine Stewards Network, to recommend a really substantial new investment to support the next steps. But first, I'd like to turn it over to Director Rocha to talk a little bit about all the progress that's been made during the pilot phase. So Director Rocha, the floor is yours.
All right. Can I get the next slide, please? So thank you so much for letting me speak today and providing us an opportunity to share. So as was said, my name is Megan Rocha. I'm the Executive Director for Resangini Rancheria, which is a tribe of Yurok people located on the lower Klamath River and adjacent Pacific coast. I'd like to acknowledge I'm here with many people as part of the Tribal Marine Stewards Network. So if tribal leadership and staff could just stand up quickly, and we can all acknowledge your presence here today. So thank you. Go ahead, next slide, please. So I just want to share a little bit about how we got to this place because it's been a long time coming. And it really sort of started out of a really sort of painful and difficult process. The California Marine Life Protection Act was passed, and you know, as we've all sort of learned, right, in that process, it didn't really recognize the unceded rights and gathering, continued gathering by California tribes. And so there was a lot of advocacy during that process, particularly on the North Coast, and it really sort of catalyzed intertribal collaboration and, you know, tribes really voicing that this gathering rights and continued connections to the ocean still exist, and the state of California needed to recognize that. And so I think it sort of generated an opportunity, and many conversations and learning opportunities sort of stemmed from that. And one of the main things also that tribes really advocated for was the importance of Indigenous traditional knowledge and the value that stewardship can provide, not only for the continuance of ocean conservation, but also how to do that in collaboration with the state and the concept of co-management in that. So then tribes on the North Coast were a part of some MPA baseline monitoring projects. And that was a really good opportunity for academics and tribes to collaborate, including in the Rocky Intertidal space and Sandy Beach. And then I was really fortunate enough to get to lead an Indigenous traditional knowledge project and really enjoyed that opportunity to get to sort of bring that knowledge to the forefront, and the state recognized that knowledge really for the first time in the marine space. And then we had an opportunity, some of my colleagues and I, to learn more about what's happening internationally in the space. And so several of us got to go up to British Columbia and learn about the Guardian Watchman program and the great work there, and learned that they had sort of modeled their work off of the Land and Sea Rangers in Australia. And so we got to go there and really learn about the great work happening in the sport from those governments to invest in tribal communities or Indigenous communities and build capacity in those communities. So then we kind of took a step back and thought about how do we work towards co-management and how do we sort of get out of this space where it's sort of, you know, state against tribes and that sort of conflict sort of space. And how do we sort of break down some of those silos and really think about focusing on what's important to all the people that are invested in this is, you know, ocean conservation and protection, and continuing to allow all communities to stay connected to the ocean and rely on those resources. And so we convened a meeting like a week before the pandemic hit. So it was like amazing timing that we all got to come together. And we had a representation from the 4 founding partner tribes, as well as California Fish and Game Commission staff, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, as well as Ocean Protection Council staff, and then also some partners at Resource Legacy Fund. And we really focused on what are we trying to build here, right? And again, like I said, sort of breaking down our institutional sort of mindsets and trying to focus on how do we build something collaboratively. And that really spawned the idea of the Tribal Marine Stewards Network. And we were very fortunate to have the support of Ocean Protection Council to invest in a pilot project for those 4 founding tribes to start to complete marine monitoring projects. So each tribe took on 2 marine monitoring projects, and then also tribal community engagement projects. So how do we make sure that this work is really being generated from the tribal community? It's responding to the community's needs and interests, and it's done in a way that's intergenerational as well. So next slide, please. So really, how do we do this work with intention, right? This is much more than just monitoring, right? How do we really build this network with specific intention in mind? And so really the purpose of the Tribal Marine Stewards Network is to return stewardship and management of the ocean and coastal territories to California tribes. And how do we do that? It's fundamentally in building capacity of tribes, right? So for example, Resiguini Rancheria is a very small tribe, and it's very difficult to sort of build capacity and build programmatic sustainable capacity. So that was it's a big key piece to it. It also has to be self-determined. So it has to allow for each tribe and tribal community to develop projects and programs that meet the needs, like I said earlier, of their community in a self-determined manner. And that really relates to focusing on geographies, ancestral territories, right? And habitats and species that are important to each tribe individually. And then find areas where that overlaps, right? And where we can collaborate. So that's intertribal collaboration, and then that's collaboration with our state partners. Obviously, a lot of this work needs to be focused, as been continued to be advocated, in using Indigenous traditional knowledge and also tribal science. So bringing those two things together. And fundamentally, you know, it really needs to support continued cultural lifeways. So, you know, so much of tribal life is based on culture and needing to sustain culture and revitalize culture for some communities. And so that really needed to be a focus of this work. And then, like I said earlier, that intergenerational learning. So how do you learn from elders, and how do you make sure that the youth are learning those things and that there's that connection between generations. Next slide, please. So we're very proud to have 4 founding tribes as a part of the pilot. So that's Toloadani Nation, who allows us to pull up the very northern part of the state, Resagini Rancheria. Then we have the Kashaya Band of Pomo Indians and the Amamutsun Tribal Band. So those are the 4 founding tribes, and we're very happy to now bring on a 5th tribe, the San Ynez Band of Chumash, to bring in the Southern California component. So next slide. So, you know, one of the efforts was we were focused on these monitoring projects and the tribal community engagement project, but a lot of work has gone on in the last 2 years of really, how are we going to work together? What's this organization going to look like? And how are we going to develop a clear sort of strategic path? So we've done a lot of work around strategic planning and really came up with a clear vision and purpose. So our vision is as Indigenous peoples exercise inherent rights, responsibilities, and obligations to steward ancestral territories and to continue to practice cultural lifeways. The Tribal Marine Stewards Network aims to return management of our ocean and coastal territories to California tribes and to ensure Indigenous knowledge drives decision-making, resulting in healthy and viable communities and ecosystems for future generations. And then the purpose of the network is we support the autonomy, authority, and capacity building of our member tribes to manage ocean and coastal marine resources and ecosystems. We work collaboratively with one another and with state agency and non-governmental supporters to develop tribally led initiatives that build ecological, community, and cultural resilience and return management responsibilities to California tribes in perpetuity. Next slide. So within that strategic planning, we came up with 4 strategic priorities: environmental stewardship, economic and community prosperity, cultural vitality, and then tribal capacity building. And then we have key strategies within that, right? Activities that we are actively seeking to complete. Next slide. And then the last thing I would just say is the power of a network, right? You know, like I said earlier, this is a proven model internationally. We know this works, and there's a lot that we can learn from that. Again, it's focused on tribal sovereignty. So how do we build a network where it provides for collaboration, but again, it allows each tribe to do it in the way that they see fit and respects each tribe's sovereignty? Again, if we can do this statewide, this is a scalable model, which is really exciting. And ideally hope one day this is a national, model to really expand. Data sharing is obviously a key piece. So as place-based people, tribes are very concerned about the areas within their ancestral territories. But if there's a way for tribes to be collecting similar data within their territories and sharing data, we can answer bigger research questions, right? And then do that with the state. That only enhances our ability to understand what's going on. Leveraging each other's expertise has been a really important factor to this. So tribes have varying capacities or experiences and knowledge. So here's a really good example in the photo where we have, JTUC coming from Tolowadeni Nation, coming down to teach Tyler at Rezzegini Rancheria how to build a traditional surfish net, what monitoring they've done. And so really trying to provide opportunities for leveraging each other's expertise. The other photo is collaboration across Tolowadeni Nation, who's been doing some great work in the Rocky Intertidal, coming and training Kashaya Band of Pomo Indians and Rezzegini Rancheria stewards on how to do that same monitoring. Synergy is another really big piece. So each tribe, again, is doing their own thing, but there's often overlap, right, of interests. So there's a lot of interest we found around seaweed and the importance of seaweed on the North Coast to many tribes. And so how do we find those opportunities where there's synergy? And then catalyzing one another, really sort of helping one another along and sort of stimulating one another's interests and abilities to push projects forward. Because as you can imagine, most of us wear many hats and do lots of things. And so sort of being able to encourage and catalyze projects for one another has been a great value within the network. And then the value of supporting one another, right? We really need to think about programmatic funding in a way that is non-competitive. So grants are wonderful and appreciated, but the whole competitive nature of it is sort of not the spirit of this. And so this provides sort of equity in a way, and how do we support one another and bring everybody along? So I guess I will just close before Mike. There you are. I'll just say that, this network is really about tribal stewardship, as I mentioned, but it's also really about a lot more. There's a lot of intangible things. And really that's about, continuing culture, developing tribal workforce development opportunities and community healing. So this really is a really valuable thing in many ways. And we just are very grateful and appreciative to OPC for their support, particularly to Jenn and Mike. So thank you.
And as Mike comes up, I would just like to personally thank you, Megan. You've been leading the whole journey. I mean, you've been along the whole ride from the beginning, where the state really wasn't incorporating tribal perspective and tribal leadership, through where we are today. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Before the meeting, I was telling Megan that she's a tough act to follow, but I'll do my best. So next slide, please. So this project here supports both Goal 2 on equity and Objective 2.1 on enhancing tribal engagement, as well as Goal 3 on biodiversity related to protecting and restoring coastal and marine ecosystems. So next slide, please. Next slide. What?
Next slide, please.
Yeah, okay, right on. So just to start where I think we should always start with this, to echo what Secretary Crowfoot said at the beginning of this item, Native peoples have stewarded coastal and ocean ecosystems since time immemorial, right? But there's been this history of genocide, of violence, of exploitation that's been perpetrated by the state of California that's forcefully separated tribes from their ancestral territories and from their cultural practices. And we know that that's harmed both people and nature. So I think it's really important for those of us who are doing this work, especially those of us who work for the state, to acknowledge that, to apologize for it, as Governor Newsom did in his executive order, but then in the spirit of moving forward and healing, to work with tribes in supporting them in reclaiming that obligation to steward their coastal and ocean territories, because that's an obligation that tribes have never given up, right? So next slide, please. There we go. In that spirit, so as Megan mentioned, in 2020, OPC approved $1 million to establish the Tribal Marine Stewards Network pilot program, which was modeled after those successful indigenous monitoring programs in other parts of the world. And we had 4 partner tribes who participated in this pilot, as Megan noted: Tolowadeni Nation, Resagini Rancheria, Kashaya Band of Pomo Indians, and the Amamutsun Tribal Band, all of whom are represented here today. And we are so excited as well with this new round of funding to welcome the Santa Ynez Band of Chumash Indians to the network. They're the first tribe to join the network from Southern California. So could not be happier about that. Next slide, please. So we heard from Megan about the steps, right, that the tribal marine stewards are taking toward their goals, which ultimately are to return management of coastal and ocean territories to tribes and to ensure that indigenous knowledge is driving decision-making in California. And we're already seeing really transformative outcomes from that pilot phase, right? We're seeing on-the-ground monitoring work that's helping both tribes and state agencies better understand the climate vulnerability of their natural and cultural resources, right? We're seeing community engagement programs that are reconnecting tribal youth with cultural stewardship practices. And we're also seeing that strategic planning, that organizational development work that is helping tribes build the architecture of a sustainable and enduring program into the future. So next slide, please. So today I'm really excited to be recommending funding for an additional 3 years of the tribal marine stewards, and that additional funding will support several components of their work. So first, it'll support scientific monitoring, which includes things, as Megan noted, like biological monitoring of culturally important species and habitats, three-dimensional mapping of rocky intertidal habitats, which are very culturally significant. Also, archaeological surveys to better understand the climate vulnerability, again, of natural and cultural resources. Next slide, please. Community engagement as well, right? So this is a huge piece, gathering of traditional knowledges and sharing of that knowledge when it's appropriate, which is something we're still obviously trying to navigate. Very important, relearning traditional stewardship practices, and of course, programs to bolster tribal access to the coast and ocean. Next slide, please. And finally, again, that strategic planning, organizational development work really focused on capacity building, on technical assistance to tribes, identification of sustainable funding sources, again, to help grow this program. And for this round of funding, there will also be a development plan that the tribal marine stewards are going to work on that'll help figure out next steps for further scaling up the network and including even more tribes, extending that opportunity for participation to more tribes across the state. Next slide, please. And I want to point out that this investment is really consistent with priorities in that draft tribal engagement strategy that Jen mentioned. That draft is out for consultation right now, again, as Jen said. But because this investment is so aligned with our values and because we wanted to avoid any kind of disruption to the tribal marine stewards work, we are bringing it to you now. Again, that overarching strategy we plan to bring in January of next year. And this picture is from that Wiyot tribe land return, which I couldn't go to, but I know Maria and Jen were there, and yeah, just so cool to see. Okay, next slide, please. So the recommendation today is that you approve $3.6 million to the Tribal Marine Stewards Network partner tribes. I'd be remiss if I also didn't acknowledge philanthropic support. We have friends in the room from Resources Legacy Fund and also from Packard Foundation who have very generously donated funding in support of the pilot phase, and also 2 NGOs, California Indian Environmental Alliance and EcoTrust, who are here as well today. And they provided really critical capacity building and technical assistance throughout the pilot phase of the network. So next slide, please. Thank you so much. And I'd be happy, I'm sure Megan would as well, to answer any questions that you might have during discussion.
Thanks so much, Mike and Megan. We'll take questions or comments from council members, but we first want to open this up to public comment. So again, if you are here in person and you want to provide comment, please line up to the left of the podium. If you're joining us virtually, go to the bottom of your screen on Zoom and find that raise hand icon and click on it. And then if you're joining by phone, you can essentially raise your hand by pressing #2 and you'll get in the queue, and you may need to unmute yourself. So let's start with public comment here in person. Welcome.
Shahushi Rosalauchi. I'm the Marine Division Manager for Tolowadini Nation, part of the partner tribe of the Tribal Marine Stewards Network. I just wanted to thank you for having us here today for this opportunity. And just to say quickly, thank you for supporting us. And I hope we can continue that support. This project and program has been a very large component to my career with Tolowadini Nation, and it's very near and dear to my heart. So having the ability to move forward with it is amazing. I love having these opportunities to provide for our tribal community and our tribal youth and staff. To be a part of something like this is absolutely monumental and very, very important to our community. So I will stop blubbering and I will sit back down, but thank you for this opportunity. And yeah, Shanila, thank you so much.
Well, on behalf of the council, let us thank you and your tribal government and all community members involved in this. It's truly an honor for us to partner.
Thank you so much.
Hello, Secretary Crowfoot and council members. Thank you to all the tribal members who are able to join us today. My name is Liz Paraseni, and I'm a program officer at Resources Legacy Fund. We would like to express our strong support for the Tribal Marine Stewards Network and for this disbursement of funding. OPC's support of this funding item demonstrates the state of California's commitment to advancing tribal leadership in stewarding ocean and coastal resources and to addressing a long history of deep injustices and dispossession. The Tribal Marine Stewards Network is an important model of how tribal-led MPA and coastal management can and must be a part of our collective conservation and management efforts. It is also a part of a growing global movement to elevate Indigenous leadership as a critical means of advancing effective, equitable resource management. RLF has been honored to partner in the conceptual stage of the Tribal Marine Stewards Network and to provide philanthropic match funding to the tribes throughout the pilot. We commit to our continued support for this important effort, and we look forward to further expansion of the network. My last in-person meeting was in that photo, and this is my first meeting back from COVID. And I just have to say, I am also quite emotional about how much has been accomplished, and I'm so thrilled to see it. So thank you on behalf of myself and of RLF for this effort. I'm only providing verbal comment on this item because this is one that we feel so strongly about. I did also just want to personally, on behalf of RLF, support our items 6, 7, and 9 as well around broader MPA management, of which this helps contribute, just knowing that this is part of an effective conservation strategy and an equitable move forward. Thank you.
Huge thanks to RLF for your partnership and engagement in this.
Good afternoon, council members, and it's thrilled to be here with many of the tribal partners, many of whom I'm meeting for the first time after speaking to them on the phone quite frequently. I'm Dr. Ricky Erickson, Marine Program Director of the California Marine Sanctuary Foundation, and I'm speaking today both on behalf of CMSF and a number of other MPA NGOs, including NRDC, Environmental Action Committee, LA Waterkeepers, Heal the Bay, and Environmental Defense Center. Thank you for the opportunity to express support for this. It'll be crucial for meaningful engagement of partner tribes to rebuild and protect resilience as climate changes, for managing our MPA network, and for planning for responsible offshore wind. We have been fortunate to work with the Tribal Marine Stewards Network and their members for many years. They've done an excellent job of conducting MPA education and outreach, assisting with compliance and enforcement, identifying pressing policy needs, and as original stewards of our coast are intimately linked to the resources they depend upon. This investment by the state promises more inclusive decision-making with local communities and brings hope for meaningful collaboration. CMSF has a long history of working successfully with tribes, creating many of the original MPA outreach materials, filling key local gaps, identifying priority needs, and gathering some of the stories to include in MPA content. It's crucial that we continue to integrate traditional ecological knowledge and infuse their connections with the coast into future management. We fully support approval of funding and applaud your recognition of the importance of tribal engagement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Secretary Crowfoot and members of the council. My name is Gilly Lyons with the Pew Charitable Trusts. Thanks so much for the opportunity to just say a few words this afternoon. On behalf of Pew, I just would like to express our enthusiastic support for the staff recommendation before you today and for the work and the vital work and growth of the Tribal Marine Stewards Network. And others have spoken so eloquently here today. So I will just say that we believe that this proposed investment in the network and its member tribes is a fantastic and meaningful step toward expanding capacity and further establishing the Tribal Marine Stewards Network as an enduring statewide entity. And we deeply appreciate the work, vision, and purpose of the network. And thank you very much for your consideration of the proposal before you today, and hope that you will approve the staff recommendation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Valentin Lopez, and I'm the chair of the Ama Mutsun Tribal Band. And our tribe is comprised of the descendants of the indigenous peoples that were taken to missions San Juan Bautista and Santa Cruz. We are a federally unrecognized tribe, and that's very important to realize that there are unrecognized tribes as part of this network. What I wanted to say, there's been a lot of important things and wonderful things that have been said so far, and we support all of them. But there's a couple of things that I would like for all people to know. And I just wanted to just quickly name those off. Number one is our tribal creation story, and the creation story of just about all tribes, if not all, states that Creator gave us a responsibility to take care of Mother Earth, that's a today term, Mother Earth, and all living things. This is our responsibility. And as a result of that, or because of that, we have the moral authority to do the work that we do. And that moral authority comes from Creator. A couple other things that are important to know is how this is so important for us to restore our identity, to restore our self-esteem, to bring healing to our members, to restore the relationships with the environments for which we can't even afford to live on now. Majority of our people live in the valleys. We can't live on the coast. And it's, so what we're looking at here is a way for us to honor our ancestors, to let them know that they're not forgotten, to let them know that we're returning to their path to fulfill that obligation given to us by Creator, and to fulfill our obligation to Creator. Oh, thank you.
Thank you for your tribe's leadership and engagement in all of this. So we're going to move next to virtual public comment, either those joining by Zoom or those joining by phone.
Thank you, Secretary Crowfoot. We have a handful of hands up. First is going to be Becky Oda, followed by Marcia Hanscom, and then Deb Self. Becky, you have the floor.
And Becky, you may need to press unmute.
Thank you. The button just popped in. Sorry, I'll start over. Thank you, Secretary Crowfoot and council members. My name is Becky Oda, and I'm the Habitat Conservation Program Manager for the Department of Fish and Wildlife's Marine Region, and responsible for the management of the Marine Protected Areas Network on behalf of the department.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. Is it possible to get closer to the phone? It's a little bit difficult to understand.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, much better.
Oh, good. So I'll start again. Thank you very much. My name is Becky Oda. I am the Habitat Conservation Program Manager for the California Department of Fish and Wildlife's Marine Region, and responsible for the management of the Marine Protected Areas Network for the department. I'm very sorry not to be there in person today and to later join the celebration of the Tribal Marine Stewards Network. I've been feeling a little under the weather and wanted to save everybody from that. I'm here to strongly express the department's support for the continued funding for the Tribal Marine Stewards Network. The department was honored to play a small role in the beginning discussions about the development of the Tribal Stewards Network with the founding tribes and supporting agencies. And we are very excited and look forward to the opportunity to learn more from the Tribal Marine Stewards Network and furthering the co-management of MPAs, fostering conservation and protection. So thank you very much for allowing me to comment on that today. We're very excited about the continued funding and look forward to what's going to be coming in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, and very glad that the Department of Fish and Wildlife is an enthusiastic participant in supporting the network.
Our next speaker is going to be Marcia Hanscom, followed by Deb Self. Marcia, you have the floor.
Thank you, honorable council members. My name is Marcia Hanscom. I'm a coastal activist speaking to you from the unceded, occupied ancestral lands of the Gabrielino Shoshone Nation on the Los Angeles coast. And first, I want to express my deep gratitude to Governor Newsom for the apology he has offered, and to you, Secretary Crowfoot, for advancing tribal leadership and stewardship efforts in California. Los Angeles County is often written off by those in Sacramento as a sacrifice zone. Past officials of the state government have even spoken about this bias out loud for the past 30 years since I've been involved with coastal protection. So please go further south than Santa Ynez, and please prioritize inclusion of the Los Angeles Indigenous tribal leaders. Los Angeles County is home to many, many Indigenous people who I'm reminded of regularly are still here. And yet, in 2004, Indigenous tribal leaders from all over the state arrived in Los Angeles to pray over the terrible desecration of the Native people by developers who were digging up areas that were part of the historical Ballona Wetlands coastal lands. Congressmember Maxine Waters stood with the tribal leaders and those of us supporting them as more than 1,000 burials and ceremonial items were unearthed. It was a terrible desecration. We don't want to see that happen again with some of the industrial alteration plans that the state even has now for adjacent lands. So please reach out to Anthony Morales, Gabrielle Crow, Cindy Alvitre, Tina Calderon, many of these tribal leaders who know and consider these areas to be sacred lands. We ask that you start over with the terrible plan there. Start over with the Indigenous tribal people leading the way. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next comment.
Next speaker is going to be Deb Self, followed by initials JE, and then Emily Parker. Deb Self, you have the floor. Deb, you're still on mute.
Thank you very much. My name is Deb Self, and first I just want to say that these comments are so moving, and I appreciate the opportunity to hear them. Secretary Crowfoot and council members, I'm Deb Self. I'm the executive director of Greater Farallones Association. We're a nonprofit NGO working in close association with the Greater Farallones and Cordell Bank National Marine Sanctuaries to support scientific research, planning, habitat restoration, and education in and around the marine sanctuaries. I'm speaking to you today from unceded Ohlone tribal land. Greater Farallones Association strongly supports the renewed funding of $3,610,000 to the Tribal Marine Stewards Network. In our intertidal and bulk help, science, and education work, GFA is proud to collaborate with and learn from tribal stewards. And happily, our intertidal science team is on its way now to participate in the Tribal Marine Stewards Network celebration tonight. We're very proud to have that opportunity. I just wanted to express that we feel strongly that OPC should continue this critical investment in Indigenous leadership and co-management of coastal resources. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is going to be JE, followed by Emily Parker. JE, you have the floor.
Hello?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay.
Okay, hi there. I'm Jocelyn, joining today as a member of the public, living and working on the unceded ancestral territory of the Amamutsan tribal band. And I'm just here to express my personal support for this action item, and really most importantly, to express so much gratitude for the work of the Tribal Marine Stewards Network and the work of Director Rocha, the leadership of the Tolowa Dine Nation, the Rezagini Rancheria, the Kashaya Band of Pomo Indians, the Amamutsan Band, and now the San Ynez Band of Chumash Indians, and mostly to just really express appreciation for all of the efforts on top of all that you do, for showing us what leadership looks like in the face of just so much heavy history. And so I express more than anything gratitude for this work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next and final public comment will be coming from Emily Parker. Emily, you have the floor. And Emily, you're still on mute. Emily, you will need to unmute yourself if you'd like to comment. There we go.
Well, my name is actually Ruthie Maloney. I'm Des. Go ahead and say it.
Hi there, this is Emily Parker. I'm going to be ceding my time to Ruthie Maloney today.
So thank you so much, Emily. My name is Ruthie Maloney. I am Yurok and Navajo. I am the founder of the North Coast Native Protectors. And I just would like to thank all the administration and the people for the great work and the funding that they're providing for tribal nations throughout California. But I would just like to say that we have other organizations that are available out there, such as the Tribal Marine Collaborative, that is going to be a statewide tribal collaborative that's going to work with tribal members and tribal entities. So I just wanted to, funding is great that you're doing, but we could sure use some funding for other tribal interests that might be there. So I just would like to say that thanks for the great work and the funding, but I really would like to see statewide inclusion of tribes, because currently our collaborative even includes tribes, the Paiute tribe, Clear-Over and Bishop. So, tribes are throughout California. We have over 120 federally recognized tribes, and it's great that you're funding them, but 5 tribes out of that many people and tribes throughout California, I'd like to see a little bit more funding for those other groups of tribal interests. But again, thank you so much. Waklau.
Thank you very much for the comment. And I may just mention that our Natural Resources Agency also is proud, thanks to the legislature and the governor, to have $70 million that we plan to essentially transfer to tribes in consultation with tribes to build up co-management, stewardship, ancestral land return. And that will not be limited to the coast. That will be across what we know as California. And I believe we have solicited government to government consultation and are engaging in listening sessions with tribes about how to develop that funding program. So appreciate the interest of tribes across California and outside of the coastal region, and recognize the need for resources to build capacity there. Let me turn it over to council members for any questions or comments they may have for Megan or Mike. Yeah, Christina.
Thank you, Secretary Crowfoot. First, I just want to acknowledge and celebrate the partner tribes and Director Rocha, Mike Eckerle, and OPC staff. This is a tremendous example of and model of establishing trust, being responsive to feedback from tribes who want to participate and collaborate and build capacity and share their generational expertise with state agencies and deservedly be compensated for that collaboration. On behalf of the controller, I just want to elevate the importance of listening to and incorporating the expertise from traditional knowledge into statewide policy. We probably could have avoided some of the issues that we're having, the extended wildfire season, even drought, despite climate change, if we had just listened to Native American experts who know their own ancestral land better than we do. And they've been telling us this for hundreds of years. Statewide, this kind of compensation is an anomaly, although I'm excited about that $75 million. For example, when we conduct an EIR, we require tribal consultation, but the state generally doesn't compensate tribes for providing their expertise. We compensate the environmental firm putting together the EIR, the water quality experts, the wildlife experts. This just highlights why this program is so crucial as a model for the rest of the state. Too often, agencies are reaching out to the same tribes about a laundry list of projects, which can create consultation fatigue. And compensation is certainly an important step that is useful and necessary, but how can we, state agencies, coordinate more effectively together to reduce the burden on Native American tribes and ensure that Indigenous knowledge is driving decision-making? I just loved hearing from Director Rocha that this is a scalable model that we can build on. That $75 million sounds fabulous. We just need a cohesive statewide policy for tribal consultation, perhaps led by this proven model that includes compensation and collaboration. Otherwise, we're all just working in circles, working in silos. And the gentleman who spoke about the core Indigenous responsibility for taking care of Mother Nature, thank you. And I want to add that the state has the responsibility to uplift these voices and support that responsibility. So just back to the specific funding, this is just fantastic. Thank you for continuing this funding. Thank you to OPC. Thank you to the partner tribes. Truly honored. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christina. Mike.
I will echo the comments of what an amazing program on a pilot basis, and the opportunity to extend it further and expand it across the state, I think is not only necessary, but we're going to see perhaps a great change in how things are managed along the coast as it expands. I have a question, and whether it's for tribal members or OPC staff. My sense is there isn't very much recognition of this program among the general communities across the state, and maybe even in the specific communities where you guys are, that that this exists, and that the benefits to the tribes and to the environment from what this work is doing just aren't being publicized, I guess. And I'm wondering, I'll ask Mike and Megan, are there opportunities to educate the communities that you guys are in and then beyond about what's going on? And I say that as a person from Santa Barbara, there would be a radical change if there was this kind of knowledge there.
I guess the short answer is yes. But I think, yes, we would love the opportunity to share. I think we've been so immersed in just doing the work that we haven't really had the opportunity to sort of sit back and reflect on what we've accomplished and share it with folks. So tonight we are having a public launch, which will be our first sort of coming out party to say, here we are to the world. And we hope that, you know, the tribal partners in the state and other folks help us share that story. But we are more than willing and open to the opportunity to share. So.
Yeah, and I would just speak for the state family. We're really excited to lift this up and to amplify this and to help others understand this. And to Christina's point, to really use this as a model in other areas, both geographic areas and areas of natural resource management. So thanks, Mike.
You whisper something to me. We now have a website too. So it's like, once you're on the internet, it's real. So please go check that out as well. Yes, thank you.
Great. So I imagine if we Google California Tribal Marine Stewards Network, we will be able to find that website, which is really exciting. And I saw the logo, which looks great. So excellent. So council members, is there a motion to approve the recommended action?
I'd be happy to make the motion that the OPC approves this disbursement of $3.61 million to the Tribal Marine Stewards Network.
Excellent. Second?
Second.
Mike. Okay, roll call, Jen.
Councilmember Brown.
Aye.
Councilmember Kunkel.
Aye.
Secretary Crowfoot.
Aye.
And I believe we have Councilmember Landau on the Zoom.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes 4 votes.
Motion passes. I know I speak for everyone when how excited we are, both to help celebrate the public launch and then to partner and learn from the network in months and years to come. So congratulations and thank you. We're going to move on to item number 5, which is also an action item. And this specific action item supports our strategic plan goal 2, which is advancing equity across ocean and coastal policies, as well as objective 2.1 within that goal, which is enhancing engagement with tribes. Actually, my fault. We just did item 5. We're moving on to item 6. So apologies about that. Let's do this again. Item 6 is an action item. It's a consideration and approval of our equity plan and disbursement of funds to establish an environmental justice small grants program. And this does advance the same strategic plan goal, which is advancing equity across ocean and coastal policies. And really glad to welcome Maria Rodriguez, our program manager, as well as Asma Mahdi, who is a senior policy director at Better World Group, to present on this item. Welcome.
Thank you. So good afternoon, Chair Crowfoot and council members. I'm Maria Rodriguez. I'm the Climate and Environmental Justice Program Manager at OPC, formerly the Wetlands Program Manager. And with me is Asma Mahdi. She is going to be co-presenting, and she's a Senior Policy Director at the Better World Group. Today, we'll be presenting on item 6. Action items include consideration of adoption for the OPC Equity Plan and approval of disbursement of funds for an environmental justice small grants program. We are excited to present a year-long effort we began last June to develop OPC's inaugural equity plan, and also excited to begin implementation. Thank you. Pass it over. Oh. 2 more slides before Asma. Next slide, please. So the OPC plan builds off of our equity plan goal 2, specifically objective 2.2 to enhance engagement with underserved communities. The development and adoption of this plan allows successful implementation of target 2.2.1, which calls on OPC to adopt a collaboratively developed OPC equity plan that advances access to coastal natural resources and policymaking. Next slide. We are recommending that the council consider adoption of the OPC equity plan and authorization to disperse up to $1.3 million to establish an environmental justice small grants program, providing direct action on a strategic priority within the equity plan. This action is a direct outcome of input provided by OPC's Environmental Justice Advisory Group and the public, with the intent to create diverse mechanisms of funding to community-based organizations that might experience barriers to accessing state funds, particularly those with capacity constraints. We look forward to and appreciate your consideration. Now I will pass it over to Asma.
Thank you, Maria. Good afternoon, Secretary Crowfoot and council members. My name is Asma Mahdi, and I'm with Better World Group. We are a consulting firm based in Los Angeles with offices here in Sacramento and in the Bay Area. We focus on environmental justice and climate justice to ensure a future for the next generation. OPC engaged Better World Group to support the development of the plan. And I want to note that through this broader equity plan, that the focus is both on internal policies as well as processes externally. And our aim was to support OPC in really thinking about environmental justice outcomes as well. So Maria is going to dive into the EJ outcomes in the presentation on specific programs and strategies a little later. But I want to share with you all a little more context on our approach to developing the plan. So OPC's position within the California state government offers a unique opportunity to connect with communities' perspectives and experiences needed to inform equitable policymaking, research, and science as it relates to our coasts and ocean. And so I want to just describe to you how we went about putting this plan together. We engaged in a collaborative design process to develop goals, objectives, and strategies to outline the plan. This process included engaging each staff member at OPC's leadership to better understand their role, their knowledge of equity, of environmental justice, and how their work currently connects to and embeds these principles. In addition to staff engagement, we developed and coordinated with OPC's Environmental Justice Advisory Group that we refer to in the plan as our EJAG, and we'll continue to refer to them as such during this presentation. The EJAG was comprised of a 13-member group of equity and environmental justice community leaders and advocates representing. Oh, next slide. My apologies. I promise we practiced. So the EJAG was comprised of 13-member group of community leaders across the state, including statewide representation. OPC and Better World Group also engaged with CNRA's Assistant Secretary for Equity and Environmental Justice to align with broader agency initiatives that are ongoing. And finally, OPC coordinated with CNRA departments and other state agencies, partners, to provide feedback on the draft plan. And in June of this year, we released the plan for a 45-day public comment period. And then next slide. The OPC Equity Plan outlines the organization's ocean and coastal priorities that focus on 4 overarching goals with corresponding objectives and strategies and actions that advance equity and justice within the council. Specifically, the plan highlights internal and external strategies for conducting equitable outreach, engagement, and funding, creating a more inclusive workplace and workforce, designing equitable coastal and ocean policies, and integrating community and tribal expertise and knowledge in coastal and ocean science, research, and decision-making. And as we just heard, simultaneously, there is an effort to develop a tribal engagement strategy. So you'll note throughout the plan that there are touch points that connect back to the tribal engagement strategy. But we recognize that that is also a separate process led government to government. And so before I turn it back over to Maria to dive into the goal areas, I just want to thank Jenn and OPC staff and the council for really putting the resources into developing this plan. Our team has had the opportunity of working with the states of Oregon and Washington on similar climate equity plans. And really the resources you put behind this, we could not have gotten to where we are without your leadership, without Maria's leadership. So I just want to thank you for that. And now I will turn it over to Maria.
Thank you, Asma. So next slide, please. So the first goal of the plan is to establish and implement more equitable and sustainable community engagement and funding methods to expand and enhance opportunities for ocean and coastal projects, policies, and research. OPC holds 2 significant roles within CNRA that advance meaningful outreach, engagement, and funding opportunities for equity and environmental justice. One, as a convener, OPC can identify opportunities and linkages between interagency groups and community partners. And second, as a funder, OPC is further able to strengthen the efficacy and effectiveness of state resources allocated by OPC. Priorities for this goal include dedicating internal organizational capacity for equity plan implementation, improving inclusive language and targeted culturally responsive engagement with communities and tribes, assessing internal processes and timelines to support flexibility, and measuring funding that directly benefit environmental justice communities and California Native American tribes, as well as creating multi-year funding opportunities that allow for long-term investments. The second goal is to create a more inclusive workplace through creative and equitable employee recruitment and retention, building staff fluency on equity and environmental justice, and increasing internal staff capacity. As OPC aims to build a more diverse and inclusive workplace, we recognize that we must develop internal policies and practices that advance equity and environmental justice, foster a diverse workplace culture, and value employees for their unique contributions and expertise. Priorities for this goal include working with the Natural Resources Agency and other state agencies to create a plan to recruit and retain a diverse workforce, developing career exploration events and programming for college students, assessing OPC's organizational structure to identify staff and capacity needs, and increasing training opportunities for staff to build their understanding of environmental and racial justice. The third goal is to lead equitable ocean and coastal policymaking in California. Many California communities who've been excluded from policy decisions historically and currently face barriers and ongoing inequities that directly impact their health and quality of life. Those barriers vary according to racial, economic, and geographic circumstances, with tribal and environmental justice communities experiencing the most disproportionate impacts. Priorities for this goal include to develop OPC's environmental justice policy, continue to increase public participation, improve coastal access, and support transformative growth and equity awareness of the council through training and other methods. The fourth goal is to lead the state in a comprehensive approach to coastal and ocean science through intentional investments in research and monitoring that value and integrate broader knowledge sources. There is a need to expand sources of science and scholarship to effectively address the scientific needs and goals of all communities. Priorities under this goal include consulting with California Native American tribes to include tribal expertise and traditional ecological knowledges into ocean and coastal science and research. This connects directly to OPC's forthcoming tribal engagement strategy, which aims to enhance tribal engagement across all aspects of our work. Actions in this goal area are designed to strengthen collaboration with community and tribal partners to include their perspectives in science and research projects. Next slide. So to summarize, the equity plan prioritizes environmental justice communities and tribes. It helps advance language access and supports diversity, equity, and inclusion. It also leverages existing and current efforts and facilitates career pathways. And overall, the plan aligns with broader equity efforts to embed equity in California. Next slide. As a living document, the plan serves as a roadmap to guide implementation while also aiming to establish the foundation for existing and future needs. We intend on reporting on progress and milestones through a standing agenda item at our quarterly council meetings leading up to a biannual assessment of the plan. Through this process, we'll further refine baseline analyses to inform performance measures and other metrics and provide a process to track progress and accountability. This will help inform and identify changes and refinements to recommendations in the plan based on the assessment outcomes. And to accelerate momentum in implementation, we recommend the council consider approving funds to establish an environmental justice small grants program, strategy 1.3.7 in the plan. This pilot small grants program will be developed in partnership with an identified grantee to benefit small and short-term projects across coastal regions that create positive impacts in California's environmental justice communities. If approved, staff will work on identifying a grantee in the following months to help design and administer this competitive program. Identification and selection of the final grantee will be based on the following criteria: necessary operational capacity and expertise, relationships and networks with targeted communities, experience providing technical assistance and capacity building tools, and the ability to administer the grants and report on progress and deliverables of the funded projects. Next slide. To conclude, staff recommends adoption of the OPC Equity Plan and approval to disperse $1.3 million to establish an environmental justice small grants program. These actions will allow the council to address key equity and environmental justice concerns brought forth to council staff and advance processes and programs that are built on foundations of inclusivity and justice. Next slide. Sorry, ahora voy a presentar en español. So be prepared. Hola, bienvenidos consejeros y miembros del público. Mi nombre es María Rodríguez, soy la gerente de programas climáticas y justicias medioambientales del Consejo de Protección del Océano, una agencia estatal que se conoce como el Ocean Protection Council o OPC por sus siglas en inglés. Hoy presentaré sobre punto 6. Puntos de acción incluyen la adopción del plan de equidad de OPC y el desembolso estableciendo un programa de subvenciones pequeñas para la justicia medioambiental. Estoy emocionada de presentar el plan de equidad inaugural de OPC, un esfuerzo con más de un año en fabricación, y también emocionados de comenzar la implementación del plan. Next, please. Para este punto, los empleados de OPC recomiendan que el Consejo considere la adopción del plan de equidad de OPC y autorice el desembolso de hasta $1.3 millones para establecer un programa de pequeñas subvenciones para proyectos de justicia medioambiental, lo cual proporcionará acción directa sobre las prioridades estratégicas dentro del plan de equidad. Next, please. El plan de equidad realza las prioridades dentro de la creación de políticas e investigaciones científicas, marinas y costeras, sobre los cuales el Estado está preparado para tomar acción. Las metas, objetivos y estrategias propuestas en el plan son el producto de un proceso colaborativo que involucró nuestro socio, el grupo Better World Group, los empleados y el liderazgo de OPC, la orientación del Grupo Consultivo de Justicia Medioambiental, consistido de líderes y defensores expertos comunitarios quienes representan las regiones diversas de California, y también amplios comentarios de agencias estatales y el público. Este proceso condujo el desarrollo de metas generales enfocadas en 4 áreas centrales que promueven la equidad y la justicia dentro del Estado y el Consejo. Específicamente, el plan destaca estrategias, prioridades y metas internas y externas para llevar a cabo actividades de divulgación, participación y financiación equitativas, crear un lugar de trabajo y una fuerza laboral más inclusivos, diseñar políticas costeras y oceánicas equitativas, e entregar la experiencia y el conocimiento de la comunidad y los tribus en la investigación y la toma de decisiones en ciencias costeras y oceánicas. Next, please. La primera meta es establecer e implementar métodos más equitativos y sostenibles para involucrar al público y aumentar la financiación con el fin de expandir y mejorar oportunidades para proyectos, políticas e investigaciones científicas, marinas y costeras. Prioridades para esta meta incluyen dedicar capacidad interna para implementar estrategias del plan, implementar el uso del lenguaje y participación intencional basada en las culturas de comunidades y tribus, evaluar procesos y líneas temporales internos para apoyar la flexibilidad, medir financiamiento que directamente beneficia a comunidades de justicia medioambiental y las tribus indígenas de California, y crear oportunidades de financiación multianuales. La segunda meta es crear un lugar de trabajo más inclusivo a través de lo siguiente: 1, creativas y equitativas formas de reclutamiento y retención de empleados. 2, ampliar el conocimiento de equidad y justicia medioambiental de nuestros empleados. Y 3, internamente aumentando la capacidad de nuestros empleados. Prioridades para esta meta incluyen colaboración con agencias estatales para crear un plan de reclutamiento y retención. Desarrollar eventos y programación de exploración de carrera para estudiantes asistiendo a la universidad. Evaluar la estructura de nuestra organización para identificar necesidades de empleados y aumentar capacidad a lo necesario. La tercera meta es ser líder en desarrollar política equitativa marina y costera en California. Prioridades para esta meta incluyen desarrollar la política de justicia medioambiental de OPC, continuar aumentando la participación pública, expandir acceso costero y apoyar el crecimiento transformativo y conocimiento de equidad del Consejo a través de oportunidades de internamiento y otros métodos. La cuarta meta es dirigir al Estado hacia un enfoque comprensivo de ciencias marinas y costeras a través de inversiones intencionadas en investigaciones y monitoreo que valoran e entregan fuentes de conocimientos más amplias. Prioridades para esta meta incluyen consultar con las tribus indígenas de California para implementar el conocimiento de tribus y la experiencia ecológicos tradicionales tribales. Esta prioridad está conectada a la próxima estrategia de participación de tribus, lo cual aspira a mejorar la consulta, el compromiso y la colaboración de tribus a nivel estatal. Las acciones y estrategias de esta meta son diseñadas para mejorar la colaboración con socios comunitarios y las tribus para incluir las perspectivas diversas en proyectos y investigaciones a través de la ciencia costera y marina. Next, please. Como un documento que será revisado a menudo, el plan sirve como una mapa que guiará la implementación en lo que establece la base de necesidades corrientes y del futuro. Intentaremos incluir un punto en la agenda para informar al Consejo sobre el progreso de implementación del plan durante sus citas cada 3 meses. Esto asistirá en la evaluación bianual del plan. A través de este proceso, mejoraremos el análisis de referencia que asistirá en guiar las medidas de rendimiento, por ejemplo, estándares de comparación y otros métricos, para así crear un proceso para monitorear nuestro progreso y responsabilidad. Este informará cambios y mejoramientos a las recomendaciones en el plan. Y para acelerar la potencia de implementación, recomendamos que el Consejo considere la aprobación de fondos para establecer un programa de subvenciones pequeñas para la justicia medioambiental, estratégica 1.3.7 en el plan. Este programa piloto será desarrollado en colaboración con un beneficiario identificado quien apoyará a proyectos pequeños y de corto plazo para las regiones costeras. Estos proyectos crean impactos positivos en las comunidades de justicia medioambiental. Si es aprobado hoy, nuestros empleados trabajarán para identificar un beneficiario quien asistirá con el diseño y la administración del programa en los meses que entran. La identificación y selección del beneficiario sería basada en lo siguiente: habilidad de capacidad operacional necesaria, relaciones y redes con comunidades intencionadas, experiencia proporcionando asistencia técnica y herramientas del desarrollo de capacidad, habilidad de administrar las subvenciones y reportar en el progreso de los proyectos financiados. Next slide, please. En conclusión, los empleados de OPC recomiendan la adopción del plan de equidad y la aprobación del desembolso de $1.3 millones para establecer un programa de subvenciones pequeñas para la justicia medioambiental. Estas acciones permitirán al Consejo abordar preocupaciones claves, los cuales han llamado la atención del Consejo de Equidad y Justicia Medioambiental y así avanzar los procesos y programas basados en inclusividad y justicia. También quiero avisar que estamos trabajando en una versión del plan en español y tenemos la intención de publicarlo en las próximas semanas. I want to note that we are currently working on a Spanish version of the plan and intend on releasing it publicly in the coming weeks. Next slide, please. So that ends my presentation. I just want to take the time to thank you for your time and consideration, bearing with me for my really long presentation. Gracias por su tiempo y consideración. And thank you all to all our collaborators, the incredible team at BWG, the Better World Group, Irene, Leah, and Asma, who are all here, and Cecilia, who couldn't make it, our amazing EJAG. Honestly, they were just phenomenal. State agency partners and leadership, our staff, and the public. Muchas gracias a todos. Happy to take any questions now.
Thanks so much, Maria. Before we take comments and questions from the council, let's move to public comment. So again, if you're in the room and you want to provide any public comment, please do so by lining up next to our podium, and online via Zoom, you can click the raise hands button at the bottom of your screen, or if you're joining by phone, it's #2 to indicate your intent to speak. We don't see anybody in the room that's providing public comment. Yes, we do. Jennifer Fearing.
Good afternoon, Secretary Crowfoot, Director Eckerle, and council members. My name is Jennifer Fearing, and I have the privilege of representing the Monterey Bay Aquarium, the Ocean Conservancy, Oceana, and Pew Charitable Trust. And I just want to express our sincere and humble appreciation for the inspiring and ambitious and actionable equity plan. I mean, just on a personal level, I've read it twice, and I find so much to inform even the way I want to go about the world and specific ways I can change my own business to put my actions or my values into action. So, and to thank you to all who work to develop and refine this plan, which has so much potential to inform and serve as a model for other agencies, departments, and indeed our own organizations as we strive to meaningfully act on our values around equity. So thank you to the staff, to the EJAG, and for everyone to their leadership on this. We urge you to adopt the plan and to approve the $1.3 million as proposed by staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. And I'll note that thanks to a directive from Governor Newsom, every single department and agency in the state is actually developing an equity plan, specifically equity action plan, specifically focused on concrete steps that each of us are taking to embed equity in the work and our workforce, everything we do. So I think you're right about OPC's equity plan being able to serve as a model to others. Let's move to public comment online.
All right, we have a few public speakers. The first is going to be Sonia Diaz, followed by Sumi Savada, and then Cody Phillips. Sonia, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Sure can.
Okay, thank you. My name is Sonia. Good afternoon, Secretary Crowfoot and members of the council and staff. My name is Sonia Diaz, a public policy manager with Outdoor Outreach based in San Diego, California. Outdoor Outreach promotes equitable access to our coastal resources by engaging youth from underrepresented communities in meaningful outdoor experiences. We had the pleasure of participating in the EJAG over this lengthy process in developing, in helping to inform this plan. And I just wanted to extend, on behalf of our team here in San Diego, we extend our deepest gratitude to OPC staff for the time and commitment that it took to put this together. There were a lot of, iterations of this plan, but we are pleased to see that many of the EJAG's recommendations were incorporated in this final draft, and that the OPC, we're very pleased to see that the OPC is serious about adopting an equity lens and making it a priority. And we also support the inclusion of the $1.3 million to establish the Environmental Small Grants Program. And this plan is a necessary first step toward equity, but we realize that additional funding will be needed in future years to support staff time towards the implementation of this plan. So we look forward to working with OPC to address any barriers potentially in the future that might come up, and we'll continue to advocate for more resources to keep this plan going in future years. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your investment of time on the EJAG.
Our next speaker is going to be Sumi Savada, followed by Cody Phillips. Sumi, you have the floor.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Awesome. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comments today. My name is Sumi Selvraj, and I'm here today on behalf of the California Coastal Commission staff to speak in support of OPC's new equity plan and environmental justice grants program. In my role at the Coastal Commission as Environmental Justice Program Manager, I work on implementing the Commission's environmental justice policy and co-lead our justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion work. We really want to commend OPC on its ambitious equity plan, and we want you to know how deeply we appreciated efforts by OPC to coordinate with the Coastal Commission, other state agencies, and the opportunity to provide comments on equity plan action items that we hope to collaborate with OPC and our other agency partners with on in the future. In particular, we really greatly appreciated OPC's Climate Environmental Justice Manager, Maria Rodriguez, who is a fantastic, thoughtful colleague and has provided us with regular updates about the equity plan and worked with her team and Better World Group to incorporate our input. While the Commission and OPC have different responsibilities, our agencies share similar goals of protecting the state's coastal and ocean resources for current and future generations. For California to have a thriving, healthy, and productive coastline that provides equal benefits for all people, regardless of where they live, their income, race, gender, or disability, depends on the state of California achieving environmental justice. Both agencies have embarked on a process to integrate environmental justice and social equity into our programs. OPC's equity plan is forward-thinking, includes action items targeting 4 goal areas, many of the same goals and principles also reflected in the Commission's EJ policy and strategic plan, which we hope to continue working on with OPC. As both our agencies move forward to protect and manage California's coastal resources and ocean resources, on behalf of Coastal Commission staff, I want to support OPC's equity plan and the recommendation for the council to adopt it and the EJ grants program, and we look forward to continue working with OPC. Thank you.
Well, huge thanks for your comment from a sister agency and the time that the Coastal Commission spent helping inform this. And I'll just note that in the report, other sister agencies across the state were engaged, including our Coastal Conservancy, the State Lands Commission, the Bay Conservation and Development Commission, Strategic Growth Council, of course, Ocean Science Trust, and then some colleagues, including Moises Moreno Rivera, my colleague here at the Natural Resources Agency, who's in the audience. So really helpful to have all of that input. And big thanks to the Coastal Commission for breathing life into your own environmental justice and equity policy over the last couple of years. Thanks.
Our next speaker is going to be Cody Phillips, followed by Carla Garibay Garcia. Cody, you have the floor. Looks like Cody put his hand down. If you still want to speak, please put it back up. We're going to move on to Carla. Carla, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Secretary Crowfoot, OPC Council, and staff. My name is Carla Garibay Garcia, and I work for Azul as a Senior Conservation Manager. I want to express that Azul was proud to have helped inform the equity plan as part of the Environmental Justice Advisory Group, and we look forward to collaborating with OPC staff and partners on the implementation stage and engaging throughout the biannual assessments to ensure that the equity plan is effectively addressing environmental injustices and inequities within the agency and beyond. We support and urge the Council to adopt the OPC equity plan and the funding to establish the Environmental Justice Small Grants Program. I want to close by echoing what my colleague Sonia Diaz mentioned, which is that this is an important first step and that we look forward to identifying avenues for further OPC's equity work, investments, and support of ocean justice communities. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for your commitment on the EJAG. And I hear you in terms of the first step, a down payment here.
All right, next speaker is going to be Cody. Cody, you have the floor.
Hi, good afternoon. Sorry about the technical difficulties. My name is Cody Phillips. I'm the policy analyst for California Coastkeeper Alliance. I'd like to express our strong support of this equity plan. We did submit timely comments, which for some reason were never received. So I'd like to use this opportunity to both support the plan and highlight 2 key points from our comments. First, we strongly encourage the OPC to consider incorporating articles from the United Nations Declaration on the Right of Indigenous Peoples into this plan. That declaration was adopted by the UN in 2007 and represents the most comprehensive international instrument on the rights of Indigenous peoples. Incorporating key articles from the declaration into the equity plan will lend more weight and vision to the goals which impact California Native American tribes. As two examples, Article 29 recognizes that Indigenous peoples have the right to conservation and protection of the environment. And Article 25 recognizes that Indigenous peoples have the right to maintain and strengthen their distinctive spiritual relationship with their traditionally owned or otherwise occupied or used lands, territories, waters, and coastal seas. We'd like to see the equity plan recognize that California Native American tribes hold these rights, in addition to the plan's existing commitments to work with tribes. Second, to reduce barriers to public participation, we recommend that the OPC commit to meeting agendas with estimated start times for each agenda item, and to consider allowing for pre-recorded audio and video oral comments. While we understand the difficulty of keeping to a strict schedule during agency meetings, ignoring a schedule altogether acts as a substantial barrier to community engagement. Meetings can last for hours, and when schedules are routinely ignored or overlooked, community members that are unable to budget the time for a full meeting may be completely deprived of their opportunities to participate. In addition, by allowing for pre-recorded audio and video comments, the OPC will provide a platform for those who cannot take the time to attend its meetings to both make sure their voices are heard and that the decision makers can see and hear the community members directly impacted by their decisions. Once again, we'd like to express our strong support for this equity plan and hope these comments are well received. Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
That is the last of our public speakers.
Okay, council members, any questions for Maria or Asma? Comments, Mike?
I'll start off by saying I was blown away by the plan. It was as I was going through it, I was like thinking of issues or questions, and sooner or later came to the point where that was discussed, and ended up like everything I was thinking about pretty much was discussed. I do have a couple of both observations and questions as part of a question. I've talked with Jenn and some of the other more OPC staff. I've always had a concern that we have an evaluation component built into every project, every grant, et cetera. And that's certainly here. My question though is this, what I couldn't tell from the plan was how the evaluation would relate to a vision of what equity in OPC and what OPC does, such that when you're reporting out, it's not just reporting out, okay, we did this, we did that, but here's where we stand in this road to a more equitable or whatever equitable state we want to be to. So whatever thoughts you might have about that, I'd love to hear them.
Yeah,
Oh, thank you for your question. There are several areas in the plan that do ask us to develop baseline analyses and baseline metrics. So we're setting up the foundation so that we have a method to track progress. And we are, for example, we're tracking all, community engagement components that are embedded into all our funding opportunities. And we'll start somewhere with like what has been approved since implementation of our strategic plan. And then off of that, within the next few years, every 2 years, we'll be tracking the investments that go towards that. That's just one example, but we have several other areas in the plan that are tracking quantitatively and also through other forms of data. So there could also be anecdotal data, qualitative data, but there are quantitative approaches to tracking.
Great. one other comment. I think a big part of equity, particularly in populations and access to the ocean and participation, is economic and income related. I see in the general community I'm in that lower income folks, whether they're of color or not, have a much harder time getting to the ocean, particularly from inland portions of I'll say the greater community where I'm at. And there is some mention of economics and in economic class, I'll say. But I think the one piece of it to think about as implementation goes on is part of it may be addressed by the blue economy and how we policy making can relate to building a stronger economic economy in coastal and inland communities. But it's also, I think, an issue of how basically how low income folks can connect better to the coastal areas and marine environments. It's just really tough, as lots of us know, particularly I want to say families. It's just getting your kids to the ocean and having your kids engage with it. Living in Santa Barbara area, there are kids that have never gone to the beach and they live only 2 miles from the beach, because they just getting there is a hard thing to do. Anyway, you've got to.
We do. Thank you for your comment. So we do have a strategy in there that we worked with Catherine Toy, or a deputy secretary for access at CNRA, and also as the consultants that are supporting her with Outdoors for All. We did keep something broad in there, and so access is definitely something we want to think about. The Outdoors for All initiative is thinking more broadly across the state, and so we're hoping through that initiative and coordinating with different sister, departments and agencies, we'll be able to address some of those in that strategy.
Yeah, it's worth noting. Thank you, Asma. A Venn diagram. So under the governor's leadership, we have at our agency the first ever deputy secretary for access, really trying to expand access to all Californians. And so she's spearheading an initiative called Outdoors for All. It's really going to finalize by early next year, really focusing on what concrete actions are we going to do to expand access to the outdoors nature and the ocean and coasts. So appreciate that there will be integration of those actions within this plan.
Chair Crowfoot, if I might, just really quickly, just to build on your question, Councilmember Brown, you'll see in the next agenda item, we're looking at doing this across all of our priorities, and you'll see in item 7, this incredible amount of work, both internally and with our external partners, to get information and conservation and stewardship out into the community, into schools, and bringing students to the coast, whether they can get there physically or have to experience it from their house. So that's one great example you'll see in a minute, and it's a priority for us going forward.
Thanks. Christina.
Thank you. First, of course, I just want to acknowledge and thank OPC staff, especially Maria, for your double presentation. That was so impressive. The EJ Advisory Group, CNRA, just everyone who's worked tirelessly on this plan. I love OPC meetings. All of the things on the agenda are just so brilliant and fabulous. The idea to look internally and externally is just brilliant. We all know climate change is an equity crisis. Climate change exacerbates socioeconomic inequities, particularly for historically and currently excluded communities. And that's why this plan is so significant. A couple pieces of the plan I just really want to uplift: the significance of bottom-up policy centered in equity as included in the plan with ongoing opportunities for engagement. The importance of incorporating traditional knowledge. We've already talked about that today. I do want to be a broken record on that, the importance of that and local ecological knowledge. These communities, they just know so much more about, they know way more than we do about the communities that they live in. And that it includes compensation as well. That's fabulous. As the state's chief fiscal officer, Controller Yee particularly appreciates that this report calls for a measurement of OPC grant funding allocated to programs that benefit EJ communities and Native American tribes. And we would also just encourage, of course, outside of this equity plan, if anyone's listening, that this be expanded and connected to a coordinated statewide effort for reporting across all related grant programs, so that we have a clear picture of how these funds are distributed across California. Similarly, connecting the capacity building and technical assistance work in 1.5.4 with the great work of the Strategic Growth Council, that would just reduce the burden on communities and maximize state resources. Just overall, I think this plan addresses and emphasizes the need for greater transparency and accessibility across all of the state's funding programs. We still have a lot of work to do, of course, to address historical and systemic injustices, but this plan is just so fantastic and a step in the right direction. Fantastic work.
Thanks so much. Any final questions or comments or a motion to adopt the staff recommendation?
Be happy to make a motion.
Great, thanks, Christina. Second?
Second.
Excellent. So just to make sure that I clarify, that the motion is that we adopt the OPC equity plan and direct staff to work with agency and other partners to implement the plan. And
exactly.
yeah, and to recommend that the council approve the disbursement of $1.3 million for this environmental justice small grants program.
Yes, I make that exact motion.
Excellent. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Brown.
Aye.
Councilmember Kunkel.
Aye.
Secretary Crowfoot.
Aye.
And Councilmember Landau.
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously. Great job,
Excellent.
everyone.
All right, we're going to move on to item 7, another action item specifically supporting our goal 3 in the strategic plan, enhancing coastal and marine biodiversity. And this is consideration and approval of the disbursement of funds to support our marine protected area management program priorities. And presenting today are Elise Goyne, California's Sea Grant Fellow, Brad Cray, who works for our state parks, and then Caitlin Gaffney from the Resources Legacy Fund. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair Crowfoot and members of the council. I'm Elise Goen, one of the 2022 California Sea Grant Fellows at OPC, and I will be presenting 7A. This afternoon, I am joined by Brad Cray from California State Parks and Caitlin Gaffney from Resources Legacy Fund, and they will provide updates on their respective projects that have advanced outreach, education, enforcement, and compliance in California Marine Protected Areas, or MPAs. After their updates, I will present 2 new rounds of funding that will continue this great work. Next slide. Both of these projects are aligned with OPC's strategic plan, specifically with Goal 3, Enhance Coastal and Marine Biodiversity, and Objective 3.1, Protect and Restore Coastal and Marine Ecosystems. Next slide. Using once through cooling interim mitigation funding, OPC has been able to support MPA outreach and education and enforcement and compliance projects. In addition to OPC's fiscal support, this work has been possible with the help and dedication of our MPA partners that you will hear about today. We will be presenting updates and recommendations for future funding on 2 projects led by California State Parks and Resources Legacy Fund. Both have successfully advanced projects with initial funding provided by OPC in 2018 and 2019 respectively. These projects have operated in partnership with California Department of Fish and Wildlife and their law enforcement division, the MPA Collaborative Network, MPA Watch, California Marine Sanctuaries Foundation, UC Davis, and many volunteers. To give you more background on the previously funded projects, I invite Brad Cray from the California State Parks to share with us the innovative ways that they have integrated MPA content into their programming. Following Brad, we will ask Caitlin Gaffney from the Resources Legacy Fund to share the achievements in the MPA enforcement and compliance realm from their current project. Next slide.
All right, good afternoon, Council and Secretary Crowfoot. My name is Brad Cray. I work for California State Parks in the Interpretation and Education Division. I've had the distinct pleasure of working with and managing the Parks Online Resources for Teachers and Students program, commonly known as PORTS, for almost 2 decades now. That's enough about me. Next slide. It's an honor to speak with you about something I believe is a prime example of how state entities can collaborate for public benefit. Let's go next slide. Thank you. Public benefit, and to present the highlights of our work over the past 4 years. I think it's important to understand that our MPA Outreach and Education Project originally took the form of an interagency agreement between California Department of Fish and Wildlife and state parks with the same initiative, but on a smaller scale. That pilot program proved to be successful, and we looked for an opportunity to expand it statewide. Our original intent, carried forward by our current OPC agreement, all started with the idea of utilizing funding to secure staff dedicated to providing digital access and engagement, and to create content about California's marine protected areas, all to reach K-12 students on a broad scale. State park interpreters working in our coastal parks are uniquely positioned to provide services to students, especially those living far from the coast. Leveraging emerging technologies, Ports interpreters connect classrooms directly to the coast, reducing the barriers of time, distance, and cost associated with an in-person experience. Next slide. 4 years into the current iteration of our MPA Outreach and Education Project, and hopefully with the worst of a global health crisis behind us, our interpreters have made huge waves. Through the Ports program's unique live interactive video programs and our curated online content, students have had the opportunity to immerse themselves in and engage with experts to explore their MPAs. Next slide. Beyond the Ports program, students and the general public who visit our coastal parks have had opportunities to learn about California's network of MPAs through interpretive programming, including in-person school field trips, campfire programs, junior ranger activities, and annual special events such as World Ocean Day. Next slide. We've also engaged the public and volunteers through important citizen science programs, such as MPA Watch, Snapshot Cal Coast, and the Coastal Commission's Snap the Shore, See the Future. Collectively, our statewide content and programs have elevated awareness of and understanding of our MPAs and helped encourage statewide stewardship on a global scale. Next slide, which is a video. First one of the day, I believe. This video provides a few highlights of what we've been able to accomplish. right, next slide. Pretty good. Yeah, I'm incredibly proud to say that the MPA content delivered through innovative ports programs, traditional in-park experiences, and with the collaboration of agencies, nonprofits, and even private industry, will engage so many more global citizens than we ever imagined. I firmly believe California State Parks is providing vital information to the public in meaningful ways by meeting teachers, students, and visitors wherever they are, whether they're digitally in their classroom or physically in one of our California state. As we collectively work towards the decadal management review of our MPAs, state parks will continue to contribute to the long-term sustainability of the network by providing high-quality, relevant, innovative outreach and education. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today and also for the leadership of OPC staff and the council. If we can move to the next slide. Resources Legacy Fund was an early proponent of the creation of the Ocean Protection Council nearly 20 years ago, and we've been pleased to collaborate with your agency on a wide range of issues over the many years. After partnering with the state of California for 8 years on the MPA design phase under the Marine Life Protection Act initiative, we've remained a close partner in implementation, where we've been able to test and pilot several innovative projects using philanthropic funds that have since become part of the state's ongoing MPA management program, including some of the efforts I will describe today, such as MPA Watch and the MPA Collaborative Network. At a broader scale, the work that we have pursued under our grant from OPC's Once Through Cooling program has been characterized by 3 overarching values: community engagement, a partnership-based approach, and learning and adaptation. Next slide, please. Starting with MPA Watch, this program was actually initiated back in 2009 when RLF first made a 6-month exploratory grant to the Otter Project in Monterey to scope a volunteer-based monitoring project with the specific goal of assessing compliance with the new MPA regulations. Since then, the program has brought in 12 partners, expanded statewide, and developed an extraordinary database of information about human uses both inside and outside of MPAs. Under our OPC grant, more than 270 volunteers are engaged annually in collecting information on a wide range of human activities onshore and off. The UC Davis Center of Community and Citizen Science has analyzed this data set so we can better inform future MPA management as part of the decadal management review process that's currently underway. Notably, MPA Watch volunteers represent a wide range of ages and backgrounds. They include parents volunteering with their children, youth groups, university students and their professors, state park docents, as you just heard, and staff, retirees, and tribal members. Next slide, please. Turning to the MPA Collaborative Network, it was exactly 10 years ago that RLF first provided seed funding, this time for a 3-month pilot project to scope a potential approach and costs associated with the idea of setting up a statewide MPA collaborative network with an initial targeted focus on San Mateo County. Since then, the MPA Collaborative Network has become a core partner to the state's MPA management program, bringing critical local input and helping to communicate with diverse stakeholders and agency partners across a wide range of MPA issues and projects. With support from the Ocean Protection Council, the MPA Collaborative Network has convened diverse partners up and down the coast to participate in community forums where they identified local compliance needs and priorities, and has cross-trained hundreds of enforcement partners, from federal and tribal enforcement staff to park rangers to city and county lifeguards. Our OPC grant has also supported specific MPA trainings for district attorneys and judges in the production of a range of training materials for these audiences, including a brand new MPA enforcement video. Next slide, please. The grant has also supported a wide range of locally directed projects tailored to address specific needs and concerns identified by coastal communities, as well as a statewide project that provided a series of 5 webinars focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, including 2 tribal-led sessions. These 5 webinars were really well attended, attracting over 340 participants. Next slide. One of the most valuable aspects of the work that OPC has supported under RLF's grant has been the lessons learned along the way and the opportunity to adapt to improve the effectiveness of our approach. To be clear, this is hard work. California's MPA network is complex. We have 124 MPAs spread across 1,000 miles of coastline with differing regulations, local conditions, and compliance challenges. Government practice and efficiency tend to favor uniformity, yet we've learned over and over again that effective public outreach must be tailored to specific needs and specific audiences, and must be provided in culturally and linguistically appropriate forms. There are no shortcuts. We have also learned how much more we still have to learn. The best practices for tribal engagement guide produced under this grant is one important starting point. We're also testing a community vetted translation process to promote inclusion of diverse bilingual input in ways that reliance on a more standard professional translation service alone cannot. As noted in the OPC's equity plan, adopted by this council earlier today, to be successful, OPC's work must be inclusive and reflect the diversity of perspectives and needs of California's communities. This requires equitable efforts that provide benefits to all Californians through intentional and sustained actions. Resources Legacy Fund deeply appreciates the support and leadership of the Ocean Protection Council, and we look forward to continued partnership, learning, and adaptation to support California's landmark marine protected area network and the diverse communities that value and depend upon it. Thank you.
Next slide. Thank you, Caitlin and Brad, for that impressive presentation. I will now discuss what is in the works for round 2 of these projects. Next slide. In order to continue this great work, staff recommends the disbursement of up to $4.2 million to California State Parks and Resources Legacy Fund to administer projects that will benefit marine protected areas through outreach, education, enforcement, and compliance programming. Both grantees have been able to leverage OPC funding to secure matching funds. State Parks will provide an additional $350,000 to boost their programs, and RLF has secured $1.4 million to support their efforts statewide. Both of the proposed projects are anticipated to begin in early 2023 and run for 3 years. These projects are aligned with Goal 3 of OPC's strategic plan and Once Through Cooling Interim Mitigation Program Award guidelines. These projects will also address a number of statewide objectives identified in the MPA statewide leadership team's work plan that aims to be complete by fiscal year 24-25. Next slide. For item 7A1, expanding MPA outreach and education efforts within state parks, we would like to build from the successes shared with us earlier. This second round of funding will expand the geographic scope of the current project from 7 to 9 districts within the proximity of MPAs to share MPA content with visitors both digitally and in person. To fill the gap in workforce, there will be 9 new state park interpreter positions hired, and they will be responsible for in-person education activities and the development and delivery of virtual digital lessons through social media and the highly successful PORTS program. To increase accessibility for California residents and visitors, these resources will be available in Spanish and traditional Chinese in addition to English. Round 2 will also expand the MPA Watch program to support a minimum of 24 MPA Watch data collection surveys per district per year. These surveys track how people are using MPAs and associated sites to better manage the MPA network. As Brad showed in the video a few moments ago, the live dive programming was a huge hit, and we recommend an expansion to include 8 live dives over the course of 3 years. The live dives showcase the beauty of our marine habitats, our network of marine protected areas, and most importantly, connects the public with state parks divers to participate in real-time question and answer sessions. By making these resources more available, we hope all Californians can enjoy our marine ecosystems and in turn comply with regulations to protect those natural resources. Next slide. For item 7A2, next slide, please. Thank you. For item 7A2, advancing MPA compliance through partnerships, we would like to amplify the great work that has begun with the support of our partners. With the support of the MPA Collaborative Network, 14 MPA enforcement trainings will be delivered to enforcement partners, state park staff, and volunteers to expand their knowledge on MPA regulations. Enforcement statistics related to MPA compliance will also be tracked. To ensure equity, inclusion, diversity, and justice as core components of all MPA compliance activities, the MPA Collaborative Network will hold community-led events, which will promote cross-collaboration between stakeholders, tribal members, and state agencies. The California Marine Sanctuary Foundation will expand the Electronic Fisheries Information Network System, or EFINS, with state parks rangers in select state parks near to MPAs to help marine wardens share enforcement encounter data while in offshore areas. Round 2 will also include the UC Davis Center for Community and Citizen Science, who will analyze the human uses data to better understand compliance with MPA regulations, and RLF will oversee 5 MPA Watch program locations. Understanding, tracking, and educating people on MPA enforcement and compliance strengthens the MPA management program to increase positive MPA effects over time. Next slide. I'd like to thank the council and Chair Crowfoot for your continued support. And I would also like to thank all of our partners in attendance today for your collaboration with OPC on these outstanding projects.
Sorry, next slide, please. Good afternoon, Secretary Crowfoot and council members. I'm Lindsay Benito, the MPA Program Manager, and I'll be sharing 2 recommendations for continued MPA monitoring for adaptive management of the MPA network. So we just heard great achievements and successes about our outreach and education and enforcement and compliance. So now we'll shift into research and monitoring. And I'll just add, I got to go watch the live dive at State Parks this year a few months ago, and it is so cool and quite a production. So I'm excited that it's expanding up to 8. Next slide, please. The projects I'll present today directly support OPC Strategic Plan Goal 3, more specifically Target 311, which focuses on the MPA 10-year review and subsequent adaptive management action. Next slide. The first project I'd like to recommend will provide an additional amount of funding of just over $3 million to California Sea Grant to support habitat-based monitoring of the MPA network, which was first initiated in 2019 through this very council. This supplemental funding will allow for continued biological and environmental data collection in 2023 in these 4 key habitats: the mid-depth rocky reef, kelp forest, sandy beach, and rocky intertidal. Next slide. To date, OPC has provided $15 million for long-term monitoring of California's MPAs. Monitoring of the network is critical to track progress towards meeting the goals of the Marine Life Protection Act and to respond to performance evaluation questions listed in the MPA Monitoring Action Plan. The significant investment OPC has made within all pillars of the MPA management program has prepared the state for its first ever decadal management review. The report is currently being drafted by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife with support by OPC staff, and is scheduled for release this coming January and will be presented to the Fish and Game Commission at its February 2023 meeting. Next slide. The first round of monitoring funding resulted in a series of technical reports that were produced by each habitat team. These reports are publicly available on OPC's website and California Sea Grants. They were released this past January, and they highlight the effects of MPA implementation on our ecological communities and consumptive groups. To help disseminate these results more broadly, OPC developed a webinar series and short form snapshot reports that are available in both English and Spanish. The webinar series was also responsive to a need heard from a series of community meetings last fall that called for more broadly distributed information about research and monitoring. So in conjunction with CDFW and support from Strategic Earth, OPC hosted a summer 8-part virtual webinar series where participants were able to hear directly from the researchers about their science and ask them questions. 365 folks participated in the series, and the recordings have been viewed over 300 times as of yesterday. So we're pretty excited. Next slide. I want to emphasize how critical these monitoring programs really are. Not only are these habitat groups tracking the effects of MPAs on our ecological communities, but they're also providing management recommendations and monitoring recommendations, which is foundational to adaptive management of the network. As we approach the first MPA review, these recommendations will guide the next iteration of MPA monitoring. In addition to MPA-specific objectives, these groups are also tracking climate change, marine heat wave impacts and response, and other important objectives to OPC's strategic plan. Next slide. The next monitoring project I'd like to recommend is funding for the California Collaborative Fisheries Research Program, or CCFRP. It's a mouthful. This is a recommendation for $1.5 million over the next 3 years. And I'd really like to point out that this group was successful in securing match funding through the state budget this year of $1.65 million. For those that are not familiar, we've talked about CCFRP a few times before, but it's a MPA monitoring program, which was established in 2007 to understand how MPAs have affected targeted fish species like rockfish through a collaborative approach that brings together researchers, students, and the fishing community. Next slide. The recommended funding will continue data collection at MPA and reference sites over the next 3 years, with a focus on tracking fish abundance, size, biomass, spillover, just to name a few metrics. Since the team has been able to conduct these systematic surveys over the past 15 years along the Central Coast, we can see some compelling results already on our fish populations. So it's really hard to pick just a few, but I'll highlight these 3 here. First, you can see that there's clear trends that there are more fish in MPAs compared to non-MPA sites. We see that the size of an MPA really plays an important factor in the MPA response. So bigger MPAs tend to see a greater increase in fish abundance and biomass within that MPA compared to non-MPA sites. While this program has provided invaluable analyses to understand MPA effects, it also brings social elements into its monitoring. The program relies heavily on the fishing community to conduct these surveys. And so researchers found that after participating in a CCFRP trip, the average opinion of MPAs by anglers became more positive, as you can see in the last figure. Next slide. While I've only been able to scratch the surface on the informative results of the MPA monitoring programs to date, I want to reiterate that continued monitoring is critical to avoid gaps in the long-term data set. With changing ocean conditions and more pressures on ocean use and infrastructure development, MPAs provide numerous biodiversity benefits and act as a living laboratory. The work of our MPA scientists has informed the review and provide much needed insights on how to adapt our monitoring framework over the next 10 years. The department, with support from OPC, is planning on revising the MPA monitoring action plan, which will guide future OPC investments and provide an opportunity to have stronger alignment with fisheries management and climate change monitoring. Next slide. So thank you for your attention as we wrap up item 7, and we'll take any questions you might have.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. Really impressive set of proposed investments. Let's move to public comment first. Anybody in the room that wants to provide public comment can do so by coming up to the podium, and then we'll move to comments provided online. Welcome.
Good afternoon, council members. Again, I am Dr. Ricky Erickson, Marine Program Director of the CMSF, and I'm speaking again on behalf of CMSF, as well as Surfrider, NRDC, Environmental Action Committee, LA Waterkeepers, to express our enthusiastic support for funding for this item. Just find my notes here. This is critical to the success of the MPA network and recognizes the monumental efforts of so many individuals across the state. Over 50% of all California marine protected areas lie adjacent to state parks, making them a crucial hub for public outreach. Since inception of the MPA network, CMSF has worked with California state parks to develop the foundational materials for MPA education and outreach, such as the initial ports program content, signs, print materials, and many things that have still being used today. State Parks has greatly expanded their MPA outreach and demonstrated their ability to successfully reach Californians in fresh and fun ways. California Marine Sanctuary Foundation and the Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary successfully piloted the use of the innovative eFINS electronic information systems. We built this app, which is being used by marine wardens to collect and share important information from enforcement encounters while they are out on patrol. This funding will expand the use of e-fins across the state, helping to reduce recurring poaching. The CCFRP research program also offers a unique opportunity to measure success of the MPA network. The impact of CCFRP can be seen in a video that CMSF created for anglers, which has been viewed over 97,000 times, mostly by anglers because that's who we targeted. Only through long-term monitoring can we ensure that MPAs are providing the benefits that are intended and creating the resilience that we need to move forward. We thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Dr. Erickson. Let's move to virtual public comment.
All right. First up is going to be Robert Roy Vanderhook, then Cameron Walsh, followed by Becky Oda. Robert, you have the floor. Robert, you're still on mute. There you go.
Yeah, just got unmuted. Hello and good afternoon, Secretary Crowfoot and all the board members of your council and staff. I'm a marine biologist and a biological oceanographer here in California. And I'd like to say how wonderful the state of California is and the State Parks Department. And much of the coast is managed by them. But I'd also like to have you consider more and share and talk more about the intersection with the federal government. We have several national parks along the California seashore, National Monument, other federal lands, National Forest lands, Bureau of Land Management lands, and then of course, NOAA in the open ocean. And I think that, I know that the federal government's bigger and can do more and is doing a lot to protect and study biodiversity, but it looks a little bit like the state of California is trying to show off what they can do, what they're doing, and there needs to be, I think, more collaboration between the federal and state government. Together it makes much of our California coast protected. Thank you.
Thank you. Points taken.
Next speaker is going to be Cameron Walsh, followed by Becky Oda. Cameron, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, OPC. My name is Cameron Walsh, and I'm a graduate student at Scripps Institution of Oceanography, and I'm speaking in support of continuing to allocate funding to CCFRP to maintain the longevity of the program. I speak here not only as a researcher, but as a fisherman. I've worked on commercial passenger fishing vessels throughout my life prior to attending grad school, and having this shared perspective has solidified, in my mind, the need for programs like CCFRP. It goes without saying that most in the science and policy side are used to seeing MPAs as universally positive and with no drawbacks. Certainly none that affect their personal lives. However, as a fisherman, it is a frustrating, helpless feeling to have areas of the ocean that you depend upon or utilize for food, recreation, or income shut down by the state. Particularly since areas selected to become MPAs are critical habitat and subsequently prime fishing areas. I don't believe that water use rights of any nature should be restricted to anyone unless the science shows that permanent spatial closure would provide unambiguous positive outcomes for California's coastal ecosystems. MPAs have been shown to work throughout the world, but some of California's newest MPAs haven't been around for long enough for us to solidify how effective they've been at achieving a multifaceted suite of desired objectives. In order to prove that the sacrifices made by fishers are for the benefit of fisheries and ecosystems, a long time series of data from programs like CCFRP is essential to elucidate how MPAs impact biodiversity and biomass. Just as importantly, programs like CCFRP help alleviate feelings of disenfranchisement felt by many members of the fishing community concerning the role in MPA management. These trips offer more convincing hands-on demonstrations of the benefits of MPAs than simply giving someone a link to a scientific paper or showing them a graph. I've personally been on over 30 CCFRP trips, and the vast majority of them have had far more productive fishing in the MPAs than the reference sites. I'm not the only fisher who has participated in these trips that has noticed this, and as just mentioned, research has shown that participating in programs like CCFRP improves fishers' perceptives of MPAs. In consideration of these factors, I do believe that programs like CCFRP are essential for maintaining long-term ecological research initiatives while simultaneously allowing the fishing community not only participate in evaluations of the efficacy of protected areas, but witness firsthand the benefits that they can provide to ecosystems. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that perspective.
Our next speaker is going to be Becky Oda, followed by Ray Hemstra, and then Emily Parker. Becky, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Secretary Crowfoot and council members. This is Becky Oda again with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and I hope you can hear me better this time. As you heard all throughout the day, there are many, many partners who have contributed to the management of MPAs over the last 10, 15, almost, believe it or not, 20 years. State Parks, Resources Legacy Fund, yourselves, Ocean Protection Council, numerous researchers, NCs, lots and lots of people to make this amazing network move forward and the management of it. And our partnership with you, the Ocean Protection Council, and the ability for the council to fund a lot of these research projects and monitoring and outreach and education. You've heard about 3 different pillars of management today with outreach and education, enforcement and compliance, and research and monitoring. And we could not fulfill our mandate as a department managing agencies for the MPAs without your support and your help, and the support and help of all the partners and tribes and tribal communities. So the department strongly supports all of the projects under item agenda number 7. And they are going to be critical for moving forward with management in MPAs and continuing that strong partnership and collaboration with all those involved. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is going to be Ray, followed by Emily Parker, and then Lisa Gilfillan. Ray, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, Ray Heimstra with Orange County Coastkeeper, and I just wanted to provide a few highlights from our Orange County MPA Watch program. The program over the years has collected a ton of high quality data that's used by state and local agencies and nonprofits in their activities in the area. It also provides extra eyes on marine protected areas that inform enforcement agencies in real time. We've also created a network of MPA stewards that actively work to support MPAs and educate their contacts on marine protected areas. And we've also provided beach access opportunities to the public. Many of our MPA Watch participants have never been to the beaches they visit before, and later they come back with their friends and expand public knowledge at these beach access sites. And then lastly, I'd just like to say that I have been on the CCFRP monitoring trips, and that's a fantastic program, and I certainly support that too. So I urge you to approve this item so we can continue this important work. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next speaker is going to be Emily Parker, followed by Lisa Gilfillan, and then Lily Mulligan. Emily, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, Secretary Crowfoot and honorable council members. My name is Emily Parker, and I'm the coastal and marine scientist with Heal the Bay. I'd like to express Heal the Bay's strong support for today's funding disbursement to both MPA long-term monitoring and MPA education, outreach, compliance, and enforcement projects. As a leader for both the LA MPA Collaborative and LA MPA Watch, I have seen personally how important both monitoring and education and outreach are for the success of our MPAs. I can say firsthand how well spent this funding will be. Our MPA Watch program alone has trained over 1,000 volunteers and stewards over the past decade who have collected over 7,000 human use surveys of our MPAs. This stewardship and connectivity to our coasts and oceans is imperative for the long-term success of the MPA network, and this funding disbursement would support dozens of programs like MPA Watch for the coming years. I also regret that I was not able to comment earlier in the meeting and would therefore like to take just a quick moment to express our wholehearted support for item 6 as well. We support the adoption of the equity plan and like to thank staff for taking our prior written comments to heart on this final draft. I'd like to close my comment today by acknowledging and thanking Dr. Mark Gold for his leadership and bold vision during his tenure as the OPC director. It's thanks to Dr. Gold that Heal the Bay is the successful organization that it is today, and our entire team is very aware of the passion, expertise, and wisdom he brings to his work. As the director of the OPC, Dr. Gold led the development of the current OPC strategic plan, which is a landmark document that has invested and is still currently investing millions of dollars into the health of our oceans and communities. And it's a remarkable achievement for this council with effects that are already being felt across our state. Dr. Gold, your friends at Heal the Bay would like to thank you for your dedicated service to this council, and we urge the OPC and other state agencies to continue the critical work that Dr. Gold and the staff at OPC have championed and which has only just begun. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Next speaker is going to be Lisa, followed by Lily Mulligan. Lisa, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Secretary Crowfoot and council members. My name is Lisa Gilfillan, and I serve as the current statewide manager of the Community Science Program, MPA Watch. Today, I'm representing and speaking on behalf of MPA Watch partner groups at Environmental Action Committee of West Marin, Greater Fairlawns Association, Santa Barbara Channel Keeper, Los Angeles Waterkeeper, Heal the Bay, Orange County Coast Keeper, Wild Coast, and the MPA Collaborative Network. In addition to our written submission, the MPA Watch Network would like to verbally support all of the action items of number 7, but especially action item number 7A, approving funds to support MPA management, program priorities, including the outreach, education, enforcement, and compliance projects presented by California Sea Grant, California State Parks, and Resources Legacy Fund. Programs like MPA Watch are critical to the success of California's MPA network. The robust outreach, education, and enforcement and compliance projects under consideration will increase capacity for the adaptive management of the MPA network, collect valuable data on the effectiveness of that network, and help connect people to their coastal spaces. MPA Watch looks forward to continuing to make science and conservation accessible to the public, while also providing valuable data to enforcement officials to increase capacity for enforcement and ultimately compliance within our MPAs. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
Our last public speaker is going to be Lily Mulligan. Lily, you have the floor.
Thank you. Hello, Secretary Crowfoot and council members. My name is Lily Mulligan, Wild Coast Conservation Program Coordinator. Along with many of our partner organizations here today, Wild Coast would like to strongly support the approval of the disbursement of funds to support all elements of action item number 7, Marine Protected Area Management Program Priorities. As a nonprofit that diligently works to conserve coastal and marine ecosystems and address climate change through natural solutions, we depend on funding for these outreach, education, enforcement, and compliance projects in order to be successful. As learned in the 10 years since their establishment, a successful MPA network relies on compliance with the regulations established to enhance their ecological functions and conservation goals. As an organization that works daily in blue carbon ecosystems on boats offshore and in classrooms statewide, we can assure you that there is plenty of work to still be done. Additionally, Wild Coast would like to express public support for action items number 5 and number 6 as well. Thank you for your time and consideration. We look forward to continuing to contribute to this incredible work.
Thank you.
That is all of our public comments.
Thanks very much. And thank you, presenters. Really impressive set of proposed investments. I'll note to council members, our legal counsel, Heather, has let us know that should we want to consider all of these proposed investments in one fell swoop or in one motion, we certainly can do that. So want to invite any final council questions or comments, and then of course, a motion to act.
Good question. I'm just curious for those who would want to attend or virtually or in person, one of those live dives or volunteer for the MPA Watch program. How can they do that?
Our live dives go out on social media. So just have to join our social media. We have it set up so it goes out on a number of platforms. We can certainly include OPC as one of those platforms for it actually to go out on. We also do closed programs for students. We did a program last year where students designed a logo for World Ocean Day, and the winning class got to speak directly to the divers. So we have a number of ways that we actually do the outreach for the live dives. They are all archived on social media and on the Port's YouTube channel. So you can see those right now if you'd like. I would also like to just point out that we don't just do them in MPAs. We did one at the Smith River in Northern California, one of the most pristine watersheds still in California, to really highlight a watershed concept that, you know, your MPAs rely on the health of the watershed. So we did that as well. The MPA Watch program with state parks, we work with our collaborative network to, you know, do all the things to get that out to the public. I don't personally run that program, so I'm not exactly sure where you can find that, but I can put you in touch with somebody who can. Yeah, perfect. Just one of the partners that makes it happen.
So efficient. If you go to mpawatch.org, there are links to all of the partner organizations that participate. So there's opportunities to volunteer in programs up and down the state, and you can access the information for local programs through that website.
And Christina, I'm told that council members might even have an opportunity to participate on a California Collaborative Fisheries Research Program trip at some point too. But listen, huge thanks to State Parks and the Ports Program and all that you're doing. You know, this does really intersect with the equity action plan that we have, and it really has provided access, both in person and virtual access, to so many kids, young people that wouldn't be able to do that. And big thanks, Caitlin, for lifting up the importance of cultural competence and linguistic access in all of the MPA Watch and collaborative work that you all are helping to fund. And then Lindsay, just, we talked a lot in the beginning of the meeting about science guiding everything that we do, and monitoring is essential. I think we're really proud of our MPA network, and we want to understand how it's working as we look to adapt it in the future. So big thanks there. Is there a motion to adopt the recommended actions?
Motion to adopt the recommended actions for,
I can tell you, let me.
We're gonna have to read that one.
Yeah, I have the benefit of the annotated agenda here. So what our council is suggesting is, if we do support these recommendations, we would move to adopt the proposed findings for all the projects as recommended by staff, and approving the projects as described, and then delegating to our OPC leadership the authority to implement the council's approval.
Motion to approve.
Okay, you would make that motion.
That motion.
Christina would second.
Second.
Roll call.
Councilmember Brown,
Aye.
Councilmember Kunkel,
Aye.
Secretary Crowfoot,
Aye.
and Councilmember Landau.
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Great. Well, we are coming around third and heading home, to use an American sports metaphor, which means we have two more items in the meeting, and one is at the very end, and that's allowing for public comment on those items not on the agenda. But before that, we have an important action item. Well, actually, we have an action item and then a consent item. But the action item is the consideration and approval of disbursement of funds for kelp restoration and management, and the plan that we've been developing. So we welcome Mike Eckerle back to the podium to tell us what this proposal is.
All right, thank you so much. Hello again, council members. For this agenda item, really excited to talk about the development of a statewide kelp restoration and management plan. So next slide, please. And this work, of course, is supportive of Strategic Plan Goal 3 on biodiversity and Objective 3.2 on protecting and restoring our kelp ecosystems. Next slide, please. So as you're probably tired of hearing me talk about by now, kelp is a foundational species that provides really important ecological functions and ecosystem services. But we know that kelp forests are also highly vulnerable to climate change, right? And we've seen our coastal biodiversity as well as our coastal communities be devastated by declines in kelp, which has been a direct result of the climate crisis. Next slide, please. But in recent years, OPC has been on the front lines of the fight to save kelp. So we've made unprecedented investments, more than $3.5 million in the last 3 years, in pilot research and restoration projects to monitor the health of our kelp forest ecosystems and to really improve our understanding of why kelp is being lost in certain places, but persisting in others. As well, importantly, as pilot testing out potential kelp restoration approaches to help save kelp. So this includes a project that enlisted commercial fishermen to help remove urchins in support of kelp restoration at 2 sites on the North Coast, which we talked about last meeting. It also includes a suite of 6 solutions-oriented science projects, which are generating promising, actionable results already. And those results are going to be available by May of next year. Next slide, please. So now it's time to build really on all that pilot work. So the Department of Fish and Wildlife and OPC together are partnering to build out a statewide ecosystem-based fishery management plan for kelp. This, you'll probably recall, is a top priority in OPC's Kelp Action Plan, which was released at the beginning of last year. And this new fishery management plan, which because of some important differences, which I'll talk about in a second, we're calling a kelp restoration and management plan, is going to provide approaches for managing, for protecting, and for restoring our kelp forests in the face of changing ocean conditions. And so specifically, the plan will include 3 core components, which you see up there: harvest regulations, as all fishery management plans do, but also a new ecosystem-based management framework, as well as a restoration toolkit. That toolkit will consist of different restoration options that are available to resource managers in the state and the circumstances under which those options might be most effective. And I really want to emphasize that those last 2 components are entirely novel. So to date, there has been no state fishery management plan that's attempted to include both of those considerations. But we really need to be that bold. We need to be that aggressive. We need to be that innovative if we're going to meet the urgency of the climate crisis. We know the business as usual just is not going to cut it. Next slide, please. So today I'm recommending funding to initiate the development of this new kelp restoration and management plan. And that's going to include 2 distinct but related initiatives. So first off is the project management and stakeholder engagement piece. This will be led by Strategic Earth Consulting, and tasks here include strategic planning and project administration support, facilitation of meaningful tribal engagement in accordance with our forthcoming tribal engagement strategy, as well as convening working groups across the state as forums for community input into the plan. I want to emphasize too that as a woman-owned business with really decades of experience working with tribes, working with a diversity of ocean communities, we know Strategic Earth is going to bring their focus on justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion to all aspects of this work. Next slide, please. The second, of course, is the science piece. As we've talked about a lot today, science has to drive everything that we do. So as the lead for California's Kelp Recovery Research Program, which are those 6 projects I mentioned earlier, California Sea Grant is really the ideal grantee here to lead aspects of plan development related to science needs. And they'll work to ensure that the most current and best available science gets directly integrated into our plan. So some specific tasks here: Sea Grant will convene a science advisory committee composed of scientists from both ecology, biology, but also the social sciences as well. Compile and synthesize different sorts of data, different data streams to help inform the plan, and then administer an independent peer review as required by regulation. Next slide, please. So the development of these more forward-looking, proactive, climate-ready strategies for kelp management through this really science-informed, transparent, inclusive process, this longer-term vision is ultimately our best shot at saving kelp. And the communities that rely on kelp, of course, right? But I really want to emphasize that we are planning on taking a learn by doing approach to this plan. So the urgency, again, of the climate crisis really demands that we take this kind of approach. We will continue to take action to protect and restore kelp as this plan is being developed. And then in turn, the results of those no regret strategies will feed right back into the plan. We just can't afford to sit around and wait for 3 or 4 years while we build this plan to take action. So as I mentioned earlier, we're going to have results from those pilot projects very soon, next spring. So next year, please get ready to hear bold ideas on kelp science and restoration from us. But today, for this work, I'm recommending that you approve the amounts up here, just about $600,000 each to California Sea Grant and to Strategic Earth Consulting to initiate the development of this plan. Next slide, please. And thank you so much. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks so much, Mike. Let's move to public comment first. Anyone in the room that wants to make public comment, please come up to the podium and we'll hear from you first, and then those online. Welcome.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Dr. Kristen Elsmore, and I'm a senior scientist with the Department of Fish and Wildlife. I'm responsible for coordinating the development and implementation of this kelp restoration and management plan. And I'm here today to share the department's full support in the requested disbursement of funds to initiate the development of this plan. Mike has already highlighted the urgency and importance of the requested initiative, so I will be brief. Kelp forest restoration and enhanced management are a high priority for the department. We're working in close partnership with OPC to develop a cohesive, community-informed, scientifically robust, adaptive, and climate-ready approach to managing the state's kelp forest ecosystems. The funds you're considering today support several core elements of the plan's development process. Importantly, the proposed initiative will enable the department in partnership with OPC to initiate plan development, including overall project management and facilitation, including stakeholder engagement opportunities, as well as support with tribal engagement at the onset of the development plan process. Additionally, it'll include integration of the best available science, including convening a science advisory committee, synthesizing critical data streams, including prior investments made by this council that Mike mentioned earlier in his presentation, as well as administering the peer review of the final plan. Each of these components are essential to developing a robust restoration and management plan for the state of California. By funding these aspects of the project today, you'll enable us to break ground on the management plan development process. The outcomes of this project will ensure that the plan is grounded in the best available science, includes a cohesive management strategy that integrates ecosystem-based management and restoration, is responsive to the needs of tribes and stakeholders, and is consistent with the department's and OPC's respective missions. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you for the partnership with the Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Afternoon again, Jennifer Fearing on behalf of Ocean Conservancy, conveying our support and appreciation for OPC's partnership with CDFW to advance sustainable management goals under the Marine Life Management Act. This KELP FMP is a key opportunity to secure ecosystem protections and benefits by managing use of this iconic habitat forming species group. And as such, we urge you to support the funds needed to develop it. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jennifer.
Good afternoon again, Gilly Lyons from Pew. We just wanted to take a moment to express our support for the staff recommendation before you today and are so pleased to see this vitally important effort move forward. The focus of the kelp restoration and management plan on ecosystem health and function and on effective restoration science and implementation will give California its very best shot at ensuring this remarkable marine algae that can sort of do it all and foundational habitat that it can survive and thrive into the future, especially in the face of climate change. And we strongly support your approval of the recommendation before you today. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Keith Rootsart, and I'm the founder of the Giant Kelp Restoration Project in Monterey, which is the biggest kelp forest in Monterey, and it is not in an MPA. I'm not calling urchins today because I'm here to urge you to not create a kelp restoration management plan that will lock us into a static problem for a a static rule for a dynamic problem. Yeah, this is my 4th year of calling urchins and doing kelp restoration. And I've learned that when we start a plan, it is very quickly obsolete and it wrecks the work. At Lover's Point, we planned on reducing the urchin densities on patch reefs to determine the threshold when an urchin barren would become a kelp forest again. As soon as we started, we realized that we had to reduce urchins to even lower densities. We needed bigger reefs, and red urchins were also a problem. We couldn't defend the adult kelp that was adjacent to the site. And we quickly realized that it became spore limited on the east side of our site. And so we had to eventually abandon the project. At the Tankards Reef site, we picked a spot and laid down a grid on the site and realized that the kelp forest formed not on our site, it formed adjacent to our site. And we successfully cleared 2.5 acres of urchin barren and found that it became immediately covered in invasives and acid weed that is illegal and hazardous to remove. The MPA started out like a great plan, but nobody had thought about what would happen if they were filled with urchins and we were prohibited from disturbing them. Each time we started with the plan, we quickly realized that the plan was insufficient and the plan itself was a bigger problem than the actual work. The KRMP will fail us because the situation changes so quickly as we learn more, discover better methods, and the ocean gets hotter. As we increase the area of our knowledge, so do we also increase the perimeter of our ignorance. Neil deGrasse Tyson said that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that perspective. Let's move to online comments.
For online comments, we're going to start with Deb Self, followed by Richard Sadowski, and then Kevin Wilden. Deb, you have the floor.
Thanks so much. This is Deb Self, Executive Director of Greater Farallones Association, again, a nonprofit working in close association with Greater Farallones and Cordell Bank National Marine Sanctuaries, as well as with OPC and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. We're geared to supporting scientific research, planning, habitat restoration in the National Marine Sanctuaries, including along the Sonoma Coast, where bull kelp restoration is a core focus of ours right now. I want to thank Mike Eckerle for his presentation, and also just note that we really appreciate his perspective of learning by doing, kind of echoing back to what Keith said. It's critically important to have an iterative approach as we learn as we go along. But speaking on behalf of Greater Farallones Association, we are in strong support of approving funds for the development of a state kelp restoration and management plan. We think the approach and the structure is good, and we look forward to being a partner in informing that. We've been partnering with the marine sanctuaries, with CDFW, going back to helping to publish the Sonoma-Mendocino bull kelp restoration plan in 2019. It drew heavily from public engagement and led to the identification of 4 priority sites along the Sonoma coast. With grants, federal grants, and a state grant from the Environmental Enhancement Fund, we have just launched core foundational science work at 2 of those sites, Fort Ross and Timber Cove, and we look forward to being able to inform this plan as we share our findings. So thanks so much for the opportunity to comment, and let's keep learning by doing and get busy on restoring bull kelp on the Sonoma coast. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is going to be Richard Sadowski, followed by Kevin Wilden. Richard, you have the floor.
Thank you. Richard Sadowski, Homefront Environmental Justice, Morro Bay. I just like to give kudos to Michael and the team for such a great project. This is what we need to be doing more of, using like the people, like for instance, using the fishermen with the urchin situation that you did several years ago and expanding on that. My back in the mid 80s, I worked in aerospace industry in research and development. And in research and development, there's going to be, even the failures, you learn something. Just like the gentleman that spoke earlier, he said that there were some problems, but we keep learning. And the only way we can learn is we need to immerse ourselves into the environment that we're studying. And I support the interactive learning, but what is really, I think, a super benefit is that bringing people in, something like the councilperson Brown said, having people come to the beach, integrating them, and then giving them purpose and learning inside the environment that we're trying to protect. And I think that this kelp project, restoration project, not only expanded scientifically, but socially, and it's a great thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Our next speaker is going to be Kevin Wilden, followed by Robert Roy Vandehook. Kevin, you have the floor.
Hello, thank you. My name is Kevin Wilden. I'm co-founder and director of Sustainable Surf, which is a nonprofit based in California. And we operate a program called Sea Trees that supports kelp restoration in California, as well as blue carbon ecosystem restoration around the world. We support the development of the KMPR. And I'd like to make a comment that we seek donations from individuals and corporations to fund the work of kelp restoration through our partners, the Bay Foundation of Palos Verdes and Reef Check and G2KR Tankers Reef. And we've seen extremely strong interest from our donors to fund restorative work now. And it seems like the kelp plan is going to take many years to develop. I do hope that there still can be permits issued to allow restoration work to get started, because we don't have that much time to wait on climate change. And then speaking of climate change, my second comment is about carbon. I noticed the word carbon did not appear in the proposal to fund the kelp restoration management plan. And I think the carbon benefit of kelp forest is an area of very active scientific research that should be included in the plan. And the carbon benefit of kelp, if it's established to be significant, should be included in any management plan that goes forward, including potential carbon offset projects from kelp forests. Now, Sustainable Surf and Sea Trees is working with the Institute of Oceanography now to develop a research project in Southern California, giant kelp forests at Palos Verdes and La Jolla, to put a virtual box around the kelp forest for an entire year to measure the carbon fluxes in and out of the kelp forest for a year, which is what you need to truly capture the seasonal variability of a kelp forest as compared to a terrestrial forest. And we're still working on developing this project. We've raised some money. We're looking to raise additional funds to get this done. And I believe this could make a major contribution to understanding the potential of kelp forests to be a major carbon sink for the state of California. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker, our last speaker, is going to be Robert Roy Van de Hoek. Robert, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. And Secretary Crowfoot and council members, well done on the meeting today. And I wanted to tell you that I'd like to see the governor and you, Secretary Crowfoot, and some of the Fish and Game commissioners participate with the aquarium in a photo op of putting sea otters back into the ocean, which happens on an annual basis, orphans that are raised and then released. Because of that process and the slow recovery since the 1930s, after the Fish and Game Commission made sea otter hunting illegal when a herd was found in Big Sur, it resulted in a comeback of the sea otter. And then scientific studies at UC Santa Cruz and all the way up into the coast of Alaska with sea otters there have shown that wherever sea otters are, they prey on the herbivores that like the marine life that eats the giant kelp at its holdfast. And so the Fish and Game Commission in 1970s wouldn't put the sea otter on the endangered species list. The United States government did. And the Fish and Game Commission said any sea otter that goes south of Point Conception on the Santa Barbara coast into Southern California has to be captured at great expense of money and brought back to Big Sur and to North Central California. It's time for that to come to an end. And in releasing sea otters with the governor and that at the aquarium, make a comment and statement that the commission is going to terminate that code that sea otters can't be in Southern California. And kelp forests have had their major decline in the Southern California region. So if sea otters are again all throughout Southern California from San Diego to Los Angeles, we're going to see giant kelp forests come back in Southern California, and that should be studied as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks for all that public comment. And I think that's a really good example of how public comment should inform how we move forward. I'm certainly supportive of the plan, in part because I think it's really important to take a comprehensive approach and not just take the sort of the whack-a-mole or the sort of pilot approach that we started with. At the same time, I think it's really important both for OPC, but also the Department of Fish and Wildlife to consider how to maintain nimbleness and adaptiveness in the plan. I think it sounds like, as I've been educated, sitting up here for the last few years, one of the challenges with the collapse of kelp is, one, it was alarming and unanticipated. And then two, it's really hard to understand still exactly what we need to do. So I take the commenters' concern seriously around locking into an approach that is, decadal in nature, when in fact we need to be adaptive and learn and deal with very dynamic conditions that will continue to change. So I just wanted to acknowledge the importance of any plan from here, not only for kelp, but just given climate impacts really on oceans, maintaining the ability to learn and adapt based on monitoring. Any questions or comments from our council members? And of course, we can consider a motion at any point. Christina.
I'm happy to make a motion
Excellent.
to approve the disbursement of up to $616,500 to Strategic Earth Counseling and $597,552 to Sea Grant to initiate the development of a statewide climate-ready kelp restoration and management plan.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Mike. Roll call.
Councilmember Brown.
Aye.
Councilmember Kunkel.
Aye.
Secretary Crowfoot.
Aye.
Councilmember Landau.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thanks so much. We're now on to item 9, which is a consent item. And a consent item is essentially a small decision that we make that doesn't bring with it a presentation, but one that we think can be made with a simple explanation. Although if there's any council member that wants to discuss this, Lindsay Bonito is here to discuss this. This is specifically a request for a minor budget augmentation of a previously approved project to support UC Santa Cruz to update and expand the existing model of population connectivity across our MPA network. Little background, OPC approved $473,000 to improve connectivity modeling for rocky intertidal reef habitats protected by the MPA network. This budget augmentation will allow for the inclusion of additional key habitats, such as sandy beaches and kelp forests in the model, greatly improving resource managers' understanding of MPA performance. And if there's any member that wants to ask questions, please do so. Otherwise, I would ask for a motion to approve this consent item.
I will make a motion to disperse. Do I have to read it?
No, I don't think so. Just as presented.
As presented.
Thanks, Christina.
Second.
Roll call.
Councilmember Brown.
Aye.
Councilmember Kunkel.
Aye.
Secretary Crowfoot.
Aye.
Councilmember Landau.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Well, we have covered a remarkable amount of ground or water, as it were, today, and it's really, really exciting. And our last item is public comment on non-agenda items, because this is obviously a critical forum for those with any priorities or concerns regarding oceans and coasts. If anybody would like to make public comment in person, please come to the podium. So we'll start. We've got Jennifer Fearing.
I actually, rather than having folded into prior comments, I just wanted to take an opportunity as an individual to say thank you to two Marks, to Mark Gold and to you, Assemblymember Stone, to Mark for his infectious ambition to get shit done. And on, frankly, on his watch, we have watched OPC become more relevant, more action-oriented, and visibly impactful. So he built an amazing team, which was obvious to all of us today. So I just wanted to take an opportunity on the record to thank Mark for his years of leadership. And to you, Mr. Stone, I am in denial about losing such a thoughtful, progressive, kind, and committed environmentalist and justice seeker. So thank you so much for your public service and for all you've done for many of us, for the people of California, and for the natural environment. Thank you.
Here, 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 here. To both Marks, to both Marks.
So it's me, Keith Rootsart again, and I have made up my own visual for you.
We thought you were giving us a big check, like kind of a reverse.
This is the timeline of how the urchin health progression has happened.
I'm gonna be your microphone here, just because we got people online and they're not gonna hear you.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
So basically, since the timer's not started. So in 2011, we had this huge urchin recruitment pulse in Monterey. And that in 2014, we had also a sea star die-off. The water was very warm and the sea stars all died off, 22 species all at once. And then that was followed by a marine heat wave that lasted for 2 years from 14 to 16. At the end of 2016, we stopped doing aerial surveys, fish and wildlife of this area, even though it was really critical for that time. And then in Urchin Barrens was formed in 2017 in Lovers Cove, which is a state marine reserve. And at that time, we estimated there were about 117 million urchins around the Monterey Peninsula at that time. Then I started going to the Fish and Game Commission, trying to get permission. I tried in 2018, petition number 1, it was denied. Then I tried again in 2019, and that petition was also denied. I managed to get a scientific collecting permit going with the Department of Fish and Wildlife in 2018, and that lasted for 2 years. And during that time, we also applied for another Fish and Game petition, and that one was approved. And so we managed to get a Tankers Reef project going, which is what I'm working on now. And that is in Monterey. That's a 3-year project. And we have been working on that right now. This is today where we are right now. And we have culled about 500,000 urchins on the project to date. And we estimate there are around 267 million urchins in Monterey at this point. And we have 90% kelp loss in Monterey. Now, we're trying to get through Kristen, who's here, a scientific collection permit going to do some more work over a 3-year project as a scientific collection permit in 4 sites in Monterey and expand this to do more. And that's what we're trying to do. And at the same time, the Fish and Game Commission is doing their decadal management review, and that should be coming up. And we're wondering if there's any action that's going to come up from that process that could help in the restoration project. And now today we have this OPC kelp restoration and management plan that's proposed that will last for 4 years. Now, at the end of 4 years, you won't have any kelp left to manage, right? But by about halfway through there, we'll have 99% kelp loss in the Monterey Peninsula. And at the end of that, there'll be about 611 million urchins in Monterey. I calculate this based on my own research, and 18% of the population is in its first year of life. Okay, we're out of time. Okay.
Thank you very much for taking time to make that visual. And just want to reiterate what our colleague Mike Eckerle said, which is we can't simply sit around and plan. We actually have to continue to take action while we build a comprehensive approach. So appreciate that. Let's move to comment provided online.
Great. Our first public speaker is going to be Walter Lamb, who has provided slides to go with his comments. Walter, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Walter Lamb, representing the Bio and Wetlands Land Trust. I want to start with the same slide that I ended with 5 months ago. I appreciated the feedback on the slide. I'm concerned that there are no new maps, right? So nothing's been done to address what these maps show, which is with the certified project for the Bio and Wetlands, it's virtually loss of virtually all coastal marsh. And I know that none of us on this call think that that's an acceptable outcome. And so it's a little confusing how this even got into a certified final EIR, but these are still the maps depicting the habitat loss that would result from the certified project. If I could have the next slide. One of the things we've heard in response is that, well, that's better than nothing, doing nothing, which is, obviously a false choice. We wouldn't choose between doing nothing and doing a project that results in extirpation of a number of coastal marsh species. And in the EIR, they acknowledge that there is no quantitative support for the idea that the project provides even a better outcome than doing nothing. Next slide, please. The qualitative evidence is apparently these color-coded slides where they mix together upland habitat with non-tidal marsh habitat, which nobody would ever do unless they were trying to sort of come to a certain conclusion. Next slide, please. So non-tidal salt marsh is salt marsh. I won't have time to get into all these details, but if you go to the next slide, please. You can see that in the same Southeast Area A and Southeast Area B, it is salt marsh, right? So you did that orange color side, it's non-tidal salt marsh. There was $1.7 million actually allocated so that the Department of Fish and Wildlife could reconsider marsh elevation so we don't have all that loss. And they've diverted that funding. Last slide, please. And so you can see, actually, even with that color, well, I'll save this for later. Thank you so much. I know you've had a long day.
Hey, thank you for sharing the slides and working to condense those comments within the public comment time. I appreciate it.
Our next speaker is going to be Christina Koo, who has also provided slides. Christina, you have the floor.
Hi, Derek. Yes. First of all, I wanted to mention that if possible, if we can have chat enabled for folks to ask any questions if they're confused on what agenda items, that would be really helpful. Okay, so we're talking about the Bionut wetland and the tidal sloughs. And, the wetlands, this is the last wetlands in Los Angeles County. And we've got 2 images that I'll show that are slated to be buried and confined to culverts under the current design. And you'll see that the slough in the first photo and then the second photo scaled down sequences of 1 and 2. And you'll see that in the next slide, please. So here, the slated to be buried and confined to the culverts under the current designs. Next slide, please.
Christina, you only provided two slides to us.
That is it. So we want to show you these two photos, and these are from the EIR report, and they are figures 2-4, page 170, and figure 2-1, page 155, showing that the tidal sloughs in the first photo will be covered by culverts. Those are the two photos we wanted you guys to understand and take a look at. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is going to be Marcia Hanscom, who has also provided slides ahead of time. Marcia, you have your one slide that was provided, and you have the floor.
Thank you. My name is Marcia Hanscom. I'm with Protect Bionah Wetlands, speaking again from the unceded ancestral lands of the Gabrielino-Shoshone Nation on the Los Angeles coast. As you know, there's a highly controversial industrial bulldozing and habitat alteration plan the state of California began planning under a governor that was in office 2 administrations ago. And this graphic shows just a portion of the land at the Bionah Wetlands Ecological Reserve within the red outline there. That is what is being called sequence 1 and 2. And that includes 36 acres of land that is owned by the State Lands Commission that I know Controller Betty Yee is concerned with. In May of 2021, the State Coastal Conservancy approved nearly $2 million for a specific set of actions, including making sure that the erroneous flood risk standards that California Department of Fish and Wildlife had used when preparing an environmental impact report. And instead of CDFW using that money for the specific actions that were approved, they've now hired a consultant firm that convened a secret meeting in July wherein they are proposing a different project, the one to go in within these red outlines. And if you look carefully at this, it shows that that's all delineated coastal wetland. So I'm here to urge you to not use precious money the state of California has to destroy one wetland habitat type so that some engineers can come in and plant an engineered garden that would purport to be a wetland. Wetlands take thousands of years to develop the rich soils that make wetlands so different. The white-faced ibis, the wandering skipper butterfly, the Wilson snipe, these are just 3 of the species that rely on this non-tidal pickleweed habitat and nowhere else in the ecological reserve. So please, please, Secretary Crowfoot, do what Joseph Aliotto and Annie Nodoff on the State Coastal Conservancy Board have asked, and let's start over with biology. You talk all the time about science being the main important thing. Let's make sure biological science is important, not engineering science. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is going to be a caller from last 4 of the phone number 5936, followed by Suzanne Cumming. A phone caller, you have the floor. And you will need to unmute yourself. There you go.
Eileen Bogan, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Eileen Bogan, Coalition for San Francisco Neighborhoods, following up on my written submission. When the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary was designated in 1992, the waters off San Francisco's Ocean Beach were excluded due largely to the Oceanside Treatment Facility. The exclusion area is sometimes referred to as the donut hole. Since the issues with the wastewater treatment facility have largely been resolved, 8 years ago, in 2014, the coalition advocated locally, regionally, and in DC for the southern expansion of the Gulf of the Farallones National Marine Sanctuary. In 2014, the NOAA proposal was to expand the sanctuary northwards from Bodega Bay to Point Arena. Although the northern expansion came to fruition, the southern expansion did not. In 2015, the coalition advocated for the inclusion of the waters off Ocean Beach into the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary as part of its management plan review. This inclusion was originally deferred to a future management plan review, but was later eliminated altogether. The coalition is currently advocating for a new designation, the Golden Gate National Marine Sanctuary. At the State Lands Commission meeting on August 23rd, the coalition advocated for this new designation. The Coalition for San Francisco Neighborhoods is now advocating at the Ocean Protection Council for the designation of a Golden Gate National Marine Sanctuary. Thank you.
Thank you, Eileen.
Our next speaker is going to be Suzanne Cumming, followed by Richard Sadowski, and then Robert Roy Vandehook. Suzanne, you have the floor.
Hello, can you hear me? Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thanks. I'm Suzanne Cumming. I'm a lawyer and a member of LA Coastal Protection Coalition and Defend Bayona Wetlands. My comment is about the misuse of funds that you've heard about, a bait and switch at the Bayona Wetlands, and request for oversight. I'm speaking about this so that you'll be aware of what's happened and hopefully we'll do something about it. Recently, the State Coastal Conservancy gave the Department of Fish and Wildlife money for the Bayona Wetlands for land mostly owned by the State Lands Commission. In a very public hearing, the Conservancy specified what that money could be used for. However, CDFW allocated that money for something completely different, as you heard from Marcia Hanscom. It's unacceptable for one agency, CDFW, to be spending money contrary to what another agency, the State Coastal Conservancy, clearly stated when they voted to approve it. Please step in and direct CDFW to use that money for the purpose intended and not let it be diverted to enabling the destructive bulldozer project and Southern California Gas's dangerous gas storage facility under the wetlands. It looks like that's what CDFW is trying to do. We don't want another Aliso Canyon, especially next to LAX. I also want to ask you to continue having the Zoom participation as you transition to in-person meetings. It's been so great and so helpful to people who can't afford to come to your meetings in person. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is going to be Richard Sadowski, followed by Robert. Richard, you have the floor.
Hi, Richard Sadowski, Homefront EJ, Morro Bay. I want to just make a comment regarding the marine protected areas. I think that maybe if we could I think you should entertain putting in an air monitoring around all coastal MPAs and, measuring not only criteria pollutants, but also carbon dioxide levels around these MPAs. And I think that that would help enhance and get that better understanding of the convection cycle of what is happening with ocean acidification and our environment, our air around us. And also, I would like to just comment and thank you guys on your intern program. We recently, in collaboration with Ecologistics, are collaborating on an intern program here for the Morro Bay Estuary Air Monitoring project that we're doing with 2 interns, and I'm looking forward to learning from them as much as we could share with them. And thank you for that opportunity of making it happen. Appreciate you guys. Thanks.
Thank you.
Our last speaker is going to be Robert Roy Vandehook. Robert, you have the floor.
Thank you, Secretary Crowfoot, once again for the opportunity to speak. And echoing the attorney, Suzanne Cummings, I hope you'll continue with Zoom meetings. Nicely laid out for you a little earlier in the public comment was Marcia Hanscom's slides and Walter Lamb's slides of the landscape in Santa Monica Bay in Los Angeles County, California, at the Ballona Wetlands State Ecological Reserve, now celebrating approximately its 20th anniversary as a reserve. And I'd like to also point out Christine Koo, who made a public comment showing an intact Centinela Slough, which has full tidal coming in and out 2 times a day. And you have heard them mention the word sequencing. It's kind of a obscure word not used too much. It's kind of a substitute for saying doing an environmental impact report. Now, just to review, a couple of years ago, the state of California Department of Fish and Wildlife did an EIR, that's the state CEQA, but they also were required to do a federal NEPA with the United States Army Corps of Engineers. And the US Army, federal government, has said no to the project. They want the levees to remain intact for flood control and safety and risk. And Los Angeles County Engineering and Public Works has also said no. A vast amount of soil has been accumulated over the building of the Marina del Rey and putting soil there. And then there's the entire ecological reserve is doing incredible amounts of carbon sequestration at this time, and then storing that carbon over the last many years. So it's not a wise idea to come in and go do bulldozing. And I think it's important to listen to the Ecological Reserve mission statement, which says to work with neighboring cities and county governments with their parklands in a larger picture. And that means Marina del Rey Harbor, which is an estuary too. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for everyone's public comment. We had remarkable participation from members of the public, organizations, within government, outside of government, community-based throughout the meeting and I think it really speaks to the work that OPC does to actually engage and partner in developing what comes before us. So big thanks there. I'll note that our next meeting will be held on January 24th, same time, same place, presumably in hybrid as well. And then we have planned meetings April 24th, August 15th, and December 12th. Sadly, those will not include Assemblymember Stone. Once again, we are deeply grateful of your leadership and commitment, both with us at OPC and just broadly with the state, and wish you best in your next chapters. And then Christina, please do share our thanks, of course, to Controller Yee as she moves on as well. Thanks everyone for joining. And importantly, thanks to the OPC staff, the interns. You all are doing wonderful work and we are proud to support it. Thank you, and we'll see you again in January.